Chapter 180. There was only one meaning for the bell to ring. The small sword pagoda ranking battle was about to begin. The small sword pagoda ranking battle was held once every 3 months. Everyone could choose to participate or not. However, the rules clearly stated that it was best to participate in the first small sword pagoda ranking battle. It didn't matter what ranking one obtained. What was important was that one could only use the sacred cultivation ground after participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. After the bell rang, many students immediately left the sword tower and headed for the small sword pagoda. Chu-Mu also brought 2 fake swords, one in his left hand and the other on his back. He walked out of the sword tower with Zhou-Yi and Xin-Tao, following the road signs toward the small sword pagoda. There were many people. All 1,800 or so new students would definitely be present. There were also more than 2,000 old students. Even if not all of them were present, at least half of them would be present. As they walked toward the small sword pagoda, they discussed all kinds of things. Senior Brother Chu, I wonder what the small sword pagoda ranking battle is like? Zhou-Yi asked curiously. Are you stupid? Senior Brother Chu is a new student like us. It's also his first time participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. How would he know? Xin-Tao said. Chu-Mu smiled but didn't answer. He had a simple understanding of the small sword pagoda from Zhuge-Ming, such as the origin of the small sword pagoda and how the ranking battle was conducted. According to Zhuge-Ming, the small sword pagoda was an imitation of the heavenly sword pagoda by many experts of the royal family. Legend had it that the heavenly sword pagoda was located in the central sword region of the ancient sword continent. It had 99 floors and was extremely mystical. The small sword pagoda only had less than 1% of the heavenly sword pagoda's functions. Even if it was an imitation, it was extremely difficult and required too many resources. As a result, only the outer mansion had the small sword pagoda. The inner mansion and the king's mansion didn't have any. Even with the sword mansion's ability, they couldn't support such an expenditure. Junior brother. A pleasantly surprised voice came from the side. Senior brother. Chu-Mu looked back. It was Luo Yufeng. Junior brother, your cultivation. Luo Yufeng was slightly surprised. I just broke through, Chu-Mu said with a smile. Good, junior brother has finally broken through to half-step chi transformation. I believe you'll be able to get a good ranking in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Luo Yufeng was stunned for a moment before he smiled from the bottom of his heart. Compared to a month ago, Luo Yufeng's aura had become purer and denser. It was evident that the effects of this month's cultivation were very obvious. The others nearby also overheard the conversation between Chu-Mu and Luo Yufeng. Immediately, they carefully inspected Chu-Mu and found that Chu-Mu's cultivation base had indeed broken through to the half-step chi condensation stage. Immediately, they began discussing among themselves. Not long after, a large group of people arrived at the small sword pagoda. The so-called small sword pagoda was actually a tower-shaped building. It was dark red in color and took up an extremely large area. It was at least several hundred square meters and was 20 meters tall. It looked majestic and imposing, like a hill standing on the earth. However, this small sword pagoda only had 1 floor. The 8 slanted corners made this small sword pagoda look like it was about to leap into the sky. The top of the pagoda was protruding, and the tip of the pagoda was like the tip of a sword pointing straight at the sky. It was as if it was about to pierce through the sky. The small sword pagoda didn't have a door. There were only black circles about 10 meters above the ground. They were about 1 meter in diameter. Counting carefully, there were about 100 of them, no more and no less. Students continued to arrive from different directions. The number of students present had already exceeded 2,000. Chu-Mu sized up the small sword pagoda. He was deeply shocked by the majestic and imposing aura it exuded. A replica that's not even 1% of the original is already so grand. How magnificent would the 99 floors of the heavenly sword pagoda be? Chu Mu was inwardly shocked and yearned for it. Suddenly, he had a thought. No matter what, he had to go to the central sword domain. Even if it wasn't for anything else, just to see the heavenly sword pagoda, he had to go to the central sword domain. As soon as this thought appeared, it took root in Chu Mu's heart and began to germinate. My current strength is definitely not enough. I have to improve again and again. One day, when I'm strong enough, I can go to the central sword domain. That's the center of the ancient sword continent, Chu Mu said to himself with incomparable determination. Look, that's the so-called iron sword ranking, someone suddenly said. Immediately, it attracted many gazes. Even Chu Mu looked over. About 10 meters away from the small sword pagoda, there was a black iron sword stele. The sword stele was 10 meters tall and densely packed with names. From top to bottom, there were a total of 100 names. The first name on the iron sword ranking was Huangfu Shunglong. With one look, one could tell that this person was a descendant of the royal family. The second name was Qin Shi, and the third was Ouyangqingyan. Chu Mu found that the names from the 1st to the 10th were all golden, while the names from the 11th to the 30th were silver. The names from the 31st to the 100th were red. 100 names were very eye-catching. Chu Mu was a little curious about the mystery behind the different colors of the names. Zhuge Ming did not mention this point. More and more people arrived. There were already more than 3,000 people. The densely packed silhouettes were swaying as far as the eye could see. Various discussions rang out one after another, making it seem extremely noisy. It was like a market, but also like a swarm of bees flying around, buzzing incessantly. Look, it's Senior Brother Lei. Where? I see, it's Senior Brother Lei. Senior Brother Lei got 85th place in the last round of the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle and left his name on the Iron Sword ranking. I wonder if he can get a higher ranking this time? Chu Mu looked over and saw a young man in a purple robe striding over. His aura was so cold that it was frightening. At this moment, a red figure shot through the air like an arrow. It tore through the air and made a shockingly sharp sound. The air surged with waves of muffled thunder. The figure flew over the crowd and turned around near the small sword pagoda before landing straight on the ground. Everyone felt their vision blur. A table appeared out of thin air in front of the red-robed man. The surrounding temperature began to rise. It was hard to tell the age of the red-robed man. He seemed to be in his 20s or 30s. His face was expressionless as if he had facial paralysis. He stroked the table with his hand and an incense burner suddenly appeared on the empty table. He then took out a 1-meter-long incense stick that was as thick as a pinky finger and was divided into many sections and inserted it into the incense burner. That's the time. So this is what it looks like. What Chu Mu noticed was that when the red-robed man stroked the table with his hand, a corner of his sleeve was revealed. It was a spatial bracelet. It was not black iron, but bronze. Black iron bronze. Could it be that there are differences between spatial bracelets? If I have the chance to meet Senior Zhuge next time, I'll have to ask him. Chu Mu thought to himself. The Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle is held every 3 months. New students can participate for free, but old students have to pay 100 credit. The red-robed man spoke in a very stiff tone. It was harsh and uncomfortable to hear. The new students frowned for a moment, but the old students were clearly used to it. Every time, 100 people can enter the Small Sword Pagoda at the same time. The red-robed man completely ignored what the others were thinking and continued. Now, those who want to participate in the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle, take out your identity sword token and place it on the Iron Sword leaderboard. After he finished speaking, an old student immediately walked towards the Iron Sword leaderboard and took out his identity sword token to touch the leaderboard. After a breath of time, he withdrew his identity sword token. Under everyone's gaze, The 100 names on the Iron Sword leaderboard disappeared and turned blank. Then, a brand new name appeared. When the old student saw the name appear, he smiled and walked to the side. Soon, a second and third person, including Luo Yufeng, Chu Mu, and the others, put their identity sword tokens on the Iron Sword leaderboard. Finally, all 3,000 people present put their identity sword tokens on the Iron Sword leaderboard. Their names appeared on the Iron Sword leaderboard. Then, the names on the Iron Sword leaderboard rapidly jumped. After 3 breaths, it stopped at 100 names. "Prepare to enter the pagoda," the red-robed man said stiffly. There were old students and new students among the 100 names. The new students were rookies, so they were clearly nervous. They watched the old students do the same thing. The 100 people surrounded the small sword pagoda, which happened to correspond to the 1-meter diameter round hole 10 meters above the small sword pagoda. "Enter the pagoda," the red-robed man shouted in a low voice. The 100 students turned into arrows and shot into the small sword pagoda through the 1-meter diameter hole. At the same time, the red-robed man stretched out a finger. Sword chi surged and turned into a cluster of flames, igniting the time incense. "Senior brother, what is this time incense?" A new student didn't understand and asked the old student next to him in a low voice. "Rookies will always be rookies." The old student first mocked and then explained, "The time incense is used as a judgment on the surface. The longer you can last in the small sword pagoda, the higher your ranking will be. In order to determine the length of time you can last in the small sword pagoda, each incense is divided into 100 segments. There is a clear difference between each segment." Although this explanation wasn't detailed enough, the crowd wasn't stupid. They could understand it after thinking about it for a while. However, Chu Mu knew that the time incense was only a judgment and not everything. The final ranking was based on the actual battles in the small sword pagoda. The time incense burned slowly. Not long after, the first segment finished burning. In the past, when the new students participated in the small sword pagoda ranking battle for the first time, "Someone should be coming out now," the old student said in a low voice. A senior student said in a low voice. Just as he finished speaking, a figure flew out from a 1-meter-wide hole and landed on the ground. It was indeed a new student. This new student had a pale face and surging sword chi. His eyes were sharp and he looked like he was facing a strong enemy. It seemed that he hadn't reacted yet. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 181. After the first incense stick burned, the second incense stick burned. Figures flew out of the small sword pagoda one after another. All of them seemed to be immersed in the battle, and only reacted after a few breaths. There was even one who was still shouting loudly after flying out. His voice shook the heavens. There were new and old students among the 100. Basically, the ones who came out first were all new students. When the incense stick burned to the 5th incense stick, all 100 students flew out of the small sword pagoda. When the 6th incense stick burned, another 100 students entered the small sword pagoda for the challenge. There were a total of 3,300 people participating in the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Every batch of 100 people had to be divided into 34 batches. Batches after batches, but it was still not Chu Mu's turn. However, Zhou Yi and Shen Tao entered the small sword pagoda one after another. They were sent out of the small sword pagoda within 1 incense stick. Clearly, their results were not good. They were completely newbie results. Luo Yufeng also entered the small sword pagoda. He lasted for 3 incense sticks and was sent out just as the 4th incense stick entered. "Senior brother, how do you feel?" Chu Mu asked. Luo Yufeng's sword aura fluctuations were very intense. It was as though he had just gone through an intense battle. "It's very magical inside." Luo Yufeng thought for a moment and described it as magical. "There's only one person entering." At the beginning, one opponent will appear. After killing that opponent, a second and third will appear. They will become stronger and stronger until they can't hold on and are killed. Chu-Mu nodded his head. He had heard of the small sword pagoda from Zhuge Ming, and it was much more detailed than Luo Yufeng's simple description. This allowed Chu-Mu to be prepared in his heart to better deal with the upcoming small sword pagoda fight. Batches after batches entered and batches after batches came out. When the incense stick finished burning, another one was lit. It's Senior Brother Lei. Senior Brother Lei is going in. The purple-robed youth strode towards the small sword pagoda and stood there. When the 100 people were in position, they turned into arrows and shot into the small sword pagoda under the red-robed man's command. I remember that last time, Senior Brother Lei lasted for 45 incense sticks and finally obtained the 85th rank. I wonder how many incense sticks he can last this time and what rank he will obtain? I'm guessing that he will definitely be able to last for at least 46 incense sticks. You must know that Senior Brother Lei has gone through 3 months of bitter training. His strength must be much stronger than it was 3 months ago. If Senior Brother Lei's final ranking rises, there will be exciting battles to watch. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. This batch of people who entered seemed to be more powerful. The earliest one to come out lasted for 3 incense stick. However, after the 10th incense stick, the 99th person was sent out. Senior Martial Brother Lei was still fighting in the small sword pagoda. Time slowly passed, and the 100 sticks of incense burned one by one. 40 sticks had already been burned, but Senior Brother Lei still hadn't been sent out. Finally, the 100 knots incense burned to the 45th segment. Everyone's hearts were in their mouths because Senior Brother Lei had lasted to the 45th segment in the previous round. Senior Brother Lei still hadn't appeared. The 45th incense stick burned bit by bit and was consumed bit by bit. Everyone was holding their breath. Once the 46th incense stick burned, it would mean that Senior Brother Lei would break the previous record. With a swoosh, a figure shot out from the small sword pagoda and landed on the ground. It was Senior Brother Lei. Ah, what a pity! The 45th incense stick has just finished burning. There is still no 46th incense stick. One by one, the old students exclaimed and shook their heads with a regretful expression. Another batch of new people entered. It's Senior Brother Lien Qingyun and Senior Brother Sun Changfeng. I wonder how many incense sticks they can last? I believe that Senior Brother Lien can last for at least 30 incense sticks, maybe even 40 incense sticks and enter the top 100. A new student said. Immediately, the old students beside him rolled their eyes. Newbie, let me tell you, in the past 10 years, the highest ranking of the new disciples who entered the Sword Mansion for the first time was only 160. After that, the highest ranking was only 200. Entering the top 100? Dream on. Humph, just because others can't, it doesn't mean that Senior Brother Lien can't. Just wait and see. Senior Brother Lien will definitely enter the top 100 and let you know how powerful he is. The new student retorted with a red face. Wake up. The old student sneered. As the top 10 of the 3 tests, Lien Qingyun, Sun Changfeng, and the others received a lot of attention. Many people started to talk about them. However, the reality wasn't as good as the new students imagined. Sun Changfeng lasted until the 31st incense stick was shot out. Lien Qingyun lasted longer and lasted until the 35th incense stick. After that, Huangfu Changtian, Fu Bingning, and the others entered the small sword pagoda one after another. In the end, the one who lasted the longest was Huangfu Changtian, who also lasted 35 incense sticks like Lien Qingyun. Although Huangfu Ba didn't enter the top 10 of the 3 tests, his strength was indeed very strong. He lasted for 32 incense stick. This batch of new students isn't bad. There are already 10 who can last for more than 30 incense stick. It seems like entering the top 300 won't be a problem. Maybe one or two can enter the top 200. An old student said in surprise. Chu Mu knew that there was a certain connection between the number of incense sticks and the ranking. Basically, those who could last for 40 incense sticks could enter the top 100. Those who could last for 30 incense sticks could enter the top 300. Although it wasn't 100%, there was an 80% chance. It was very high. As for those who didn't last for more than 30 incense sticks, there wasn't a clear ranking. They belonged to the mediocre crowd. To be able to enter the top 300 in the first challenge of the Small Sword Pagoda was quite amazing for new students. Because they weren't familiar with the Small Sword Pagoda, they would be more prepared during the second challenge and would often be able to make significant progress. Another 100 names appeared on the Iron Sword ranking. Chu Mu was also among them. Junior brother, do your best, Luo Yufeng encouraged. Chu Mu nodded and walked out of the crowd. He stood under the Small Sword Pagoda and faced the entrance. It's him. Liang Rui slightly frowned as he walked out of the crowd. The gazes of Lian Qingyun, Huangfu Changtian, and the others were all focused on Chu Mu. This dark horse had suddenly rushed out of the 3 natural barriers and defeated Huangfu Ba with 1 sword. They didn't know how many incense sticks he could last. Before the final ranking was out, the number of incense sticks he could last became their only criterion. Soon, all 100 people arrived and stood under the Small Sword Pagoda. Coincidentally, Liang Rui was standing beside Chu Mu. Junior brother, I lasted for 38 incense sticks in the last round of the Small Sword Pagoda. I wonder how many incense sticks you can last? Liang Rui turned his head and glanced at Chu Mu. He smiled coldly and said. Chu Mu only glanced at him indifferently and didn't answer. The truth would be the best answer. Under the red-robed man's command, everyone's figures swayed and transformed into arrows that shot towards the Small Sword Pagoda. With a swoosh, they shot into the Small Sword Pagoda and disappeared. Chu Mu only felt that he had instantly entered a pitch-black space. Even De Sheng could only see darkness. Suddenly, a burst of light was born from nothingness and tore apart the darkness. Caught off guard, Chu Mu used his hand to cover his eyes. After 3 breaths, he put down his hand and opened his eyes. He was instantly stunned. It was as if time had changed and he was in a spacious room. The floor and walls were milky white and there was no furniture. Chu Mu immediately reacted. At the same time, an illusory silhouette appeared out of thin air. After 3 breaths, it condensed into a complete person and emitted an ordinary peak 10th stage sword chi fluctuation. This person's appearance was very ordinary, but it gave Chu Mu a familiar feeling. It was as if he had seen him somewhere before. Without waiting for Chu Mu to think, this person had already pulled out his sword and stabbed towards Chu Mu. It was concise and fast without any extra movement. The sharp edge pierced through the air and approached. Chu Mu took a step back and turned around. He pulled out his sword and slashed out a stream of light that cut through this person. Blood splashed through the air and splashed onto the ground. All of a sudden, this person disappeared like a popped bubble. After 1 breath, another figure quickly condensed and appeared in less than 3 breaths. It looked exactly the same as the first one. Without saying a word and without any expression, it stabbed towards Chu Mu again. Chu Mu's sharp senses noticed that this person's sword was not only a bit faster, but the sword chi it contained was also a bit denser. It was even more powerful. His body swayed and another sword attack killed this person. The third person appeared and attacked Chu Mu again. This time, he was even more powerful. Chu Mu's expression was calm and unperturbed. Every time a figure appeared to attack him, he would immediately kill it with a single sword attack. However, Chu Mu could clearly feel that the later figures that appeared, the stronger they were, and the faster they appeared. The sword light swept across the sky like a rainbow. Another figure was defeated by Chu Mu's sword. Before it was completely defeated, the 11th figure had already appeared. Moreover, it had just finished condensing and was already attacking Chu Mu with a sword attack. The wind and thunder roared, and its power was far stronger than before. The 11th person already had a half-step Qi transformation realm sword Qi cultivation. His sword arts had already reached the basic level of a high-grade sword art. However, Chu Mu still managed to kill him with a single sword attack. Appear, disperse, appear again, disperse again. The 21st person finished condensing in less than one breath's time and stabbed out with his sword. Immediately, the wind whistled and formed a gale that blew towards Chu Mu as if it wanted to blow him away. A high-grade sword art killing move. When the sword stabbed out, the blade seemed to be divided into 3 parts. The top and middle parts were at the same time, destroying the high-grade killing move that the opponent had just used. He slid forward, and the sharp blade of his sword swept across the opponent's neck. 2 sword attacks defeated the opponent. The 22nd person appeared, and he was even stronger. Chu Mu actually needed 3 sword attacks to defeat him. Outside the small sword pagoda, 2 sections of the time incense had already burned. Only 3 new students with weaker cultivations were ejected. Luo Yufeng looked at the small sword pagoda and then at the time incense. I believe that junior apprentice brother will definitely be able to hold on for more than 30 sections, but I don't know if he can hold on for 40 sections. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 182. Violent gales roared as huge waves surged forward, destroying everything in their path as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. 2 figures, one on the left and one on the right, used their high-level killer moves. Sword Qi was extremely violent and sharp, shaking the surrounding air as it surged towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu's expression changed slightly. Both of them had half-step Qi transformation realm sword Qi cultivation, slightly surpassing Chu Mu's. Moreover, the high-level killer moves they used were at Deshang's level. They were extremely powerful. If it were any other opponent with the same level of strength, they would only be defeated by the 2 of them. However, Chu Mu's left foot took a step forward and a phantom appeared. In the next moment, the phantom was destroyed by the 2 killer moves. Chu Mu's sword had already turned into a cold star, piercing through the void and entering the throat of one of them. Without the slightest hesitation, his movements were as smooth as flowing water. With a single slash, the second person was killed, and the killing move disappeared. At the same time, another person appeared. Before he had fully formed, he had already attacked with his sword. Chu Mu's killing speed was extremely fast, but the speed at which these people appeared was also increasing. In the blink of an eye, 2 of them appeared and used their high-level killer move. They were extremely powerful. Before Chu Mu could kill the 2 of them, the third one appeared and attacked with his sword. The sword Qi was extremely threatening. The small sword pagoda could allow 100 people to enter at the same time. After these 100 people entered, they would be sent into a small independent space to face wave after wave of enemies. The enemies that appeared at the beginning were all the same. They were all ordinary 10th stage peak warriors. Moreover, they did not appear quickly. However, once they were killed, the enemies that appeared would become faster and faster, and their strength would also become stronger. In other words, the faster you killed the enemies, the faster the enemies would appear. Every time an enemy appeared, their overall strength would be slightly stronger than the previous one. Perhaps it was reflected in the cultivation of sword Qi, or the power of the swordsmanship, or the level of mastery of the swordsmanship. Some of the people in the other 99 small spaces were already empty because they had been killed by the enemy and teleported outside. Some of them were still fighting, and the battle was very intense. Both sides went back and forth, and in the end, they killed the enemy with great difficulty, but in a flash, a new enemy appeared. After Li Yingrui killed a strong enemy with a few sword strikes, another strong enemy would appear immediately. Furthermore, after one sword strike, a second one would immediately appear, causing the pressure on Liang Rui to multiply. Although he was very strong, and the speed at which he killed his enemies was fast enough, far surpassing the others, he was still far behind Chu Mu. Each of the three enemies had a profound cultivation of half-step Qi transformation realm. Once they attacked, their killing moves were relentless, and their power was not inferior to the gold-tipped sword art. Besieging Chu Mu, he was in a precarious situation. Chu Mu used the phantom step, and 7 phantoms alternated between each other. He immediately broke free from their killing moves and swept past them in an instant, leaving behind an afterimage as he swung his sword. There seemed to be a slight shattering sound as the 3 enemies instantly collapsed. 3 streams of blood sprayed out, splattering onto the ground like ink. The originally milky white ground had long since been dyed red, turning into a bloody purgatory. It was a shocking sight. Even the milky white walls were splattered with scarlet, giving off a demonic feeling. Powerful enemies continued to appear. There were already 4 of them, and each of them had a profound cultivation of half-step Qi transformation realm, close to the peak of half-step Qi transformation realm. Moreover, Chu Mu was surprised to find that when these 4 used their killing moves, they actually contained 10% of the intent fluctuations. Chu Mu's 7 phantoms were all destroyed, and even his own body was affected. His protective sword Qi was also destroyed, and he was almost hit. It was extremely dangerous. With a calm expression, Chu Mu alternated between the phantom step art and the windwalk movement art. His body floated like a ghost, like a willow swaying in the wind, and his sword was like a phoenix flying through the 9 heavens. Blood splattered across the sky, dyeing the ground red like a bloody hell. Chu Mu exhaled slightly. He felt the pressure increase, but at the same time, he felt a little excited. This kind of continuous killing made his blood boil. Layers of power surged through his body, and the thick and pungent smell of blood made him unable to help but let out a long howl. The sword light flashed, and the tip of the golden blade tore through the air. Sword Qi surged and condensed, and with a single slash, the 3 enemies that had appeared at almost the same time and attacked him before they had even fully condensed were instantly cut in half. Kill, kill, kill. Chu Mu displayed his sword skills bit by bit. Vibration, deflection, rotation, and all kinds of sword techniques were not held back. He displayed his sword skills to the fullest. There had never been a moment that could make Chu Mu feel so satisfied. When Ren Yun couldn't, Wei Hong couldn't, Xiao Qianfeng couldn't, 1 step, 1 kill, 1 sword, 1 life. 1 figure after another was ejected from the small sword pagoda, and the 100 sticks of incense continued to burn. It's the 30th section now, and there are still 8 people who haven't been ejected. I remember that among the 8 people, one of them is a new student. That's right, it's a new student. However, he is ranked 3rd among the new students in the 3 stages of the natural barrier. I guess he can at least last until the 33rd section of the incense. Not long after, at the 32nd section of the incense, another person was ejected. At the 33rd section of the incense, another person was ejected, but it wasn't Chu Mu. Amazing. Could it be that this new student can last until the 34th section of the incense, or even the 35th section? At the 34th section of the incense, 2 people were ejected at the same time. At the 35th section of the incense, another person was ejected. At the 36th section of the incense, another person was ejected. At the 37th section of the incense, yet it wasn't Chu Mu. Instantly, everyone was shocked. Lian Qinyun, Huangfu Changtian, and the others were even extremely shocked. Even though Chu Mu defeated Huangfu Ba with a single sword strike earlier, they were able to discern that even though the might of that sword strike was formidable, Chu Mu would surely exhaust an enormous amount of energy, and it would be difficult for him to execute a second sword strike. All of them were confident that they could compete with Chu Mu and even defeat Chu Mu in the end. Especially after they'd gone through a month of cultivation in the outer court, they felt that their strengths had obviously improved. But no matter if it was Lien Qingyun or Huangfu Changtian, both of them had only persisted until the 35th section of the incense stick. Presently, the incense stick had already burned until the 38th section of the incense stick, yet Chu Mu still hadn't been ejected, so how could they not be shocked? Didn't this indirectly indicate that Chu Mu's strength was actually above them? Lien Qingyun and Huangfu Changtian shook their heads as they felt it was impossible. With their natural talent and various other aspects, how could they possibly be inferior to someone from a low-grade sword sect? When the 38th section of the incense stick started to burn, Chu Mu and Li Yingrui still hadn't been ejected, yet Lien Qingyun, Huangfu Changtian, and the others were unable to maintain their composure. As expected of the greatest dark horse this time. Senior Brother Chu is really formidable, said Chen Tao and Zhou Yi. Luo Yufeng's face was covered in smiles as he felt extremely refreshed. The 38th section of the incense stick swiftly burned and had already burned to the end, and when it was about to burn to the 39th section, a figure suddenly shot out from within the small sword pagoda. He's finally out. Lien Qingyun and the others had always been staring fixedly at the small sword pagoda. At this moment they heaved a sigh of relief, but persisting until the 38th section of the incense stick still caused them to be unable to maintain their composure in their hearts. It isn't that new student. It's Senior Brotherly. A series of exclamations resounded. Lien Qingyun, Huangfu Changtian, and the others looked over and actually didn't see Chu Mu, but another person. Instantly, the corners of their eyes kept twitching. When Li Yingrui appeared, he first looked at the time stick and discovered that it was only the 38th section. He was first stunned when he saw that the red-robed deacon hadn't extinguished the time stick, which meant that there was still someone in the small sword pagoda that hadn't come out. Who exactly was it? Li Yingrui quickly swept a glance and his expression slightly changed as he was somewhat in disbelief. He abruptly turned back to look at the small sword pagoda. Inside the small sword pagoda, the milky white room had long been covered in scarlet blood from the endless spray of blood. The viscous blood flowed on the ground as if converging into a stream. The air was completely filled with an intense and pungent smell of blood. If an ordinary person were to stay in this place, they would suffocate to death within a few seconds. However, 7 phantoms could be seen shuttling back and forth. There were a few wounds on Chu Mu's body, which were caused by the sword killer moves of powerful enemies. Even his clothes were dyed red with blood. His expression was calm, but his eyes were abnormally bright like the sword light that contained 100% sharpness. One could faintly see a trace of madness flashing in the corner of his eyes. Chu Mu had long forgotten about everything else and was completely immersed in the massacre. His sword had taken away countless lives, and he had also forgotten how many times he had been struck. 10 powerful enemies surrounded Chu Mu. Their bodies swayed like a gale and lightning, and their speed was unbelievably fast. Their swords were like gray pythons and flood dragons with unparalleled strength. They were also like violent thunderstorms and torrential rain. The entire room was enveloped by this terrifying high-grade killer move that contained 20% of the concept, and there was nowhere to dodge. Mobilizing the little remaining sword chi, Chu Mu slashed out with his sword, and white clouds converged and revolved. Cloud-shattering sword explosion. Poochie-poochie sounds rang out as the wind, thunder, torrential rain were all penetrated. The 10 powerful enemies vomited blood and died. However, Chu Mu was also swept by the aftershock of the sword chi. A large number of wounds appeared on his body, and blood spurted out. Immediately, 5 powerful enemies appeared again and attacked Chu Mu. Chu Mu barely killed 2 of them before he was struck by the other 3 killer moves and died. He turned into a white light and disappeared with a swoosh. A figure shot out of the small sword pagoda. Everyone looked and saw that the 100 knots incense had just burned to the 39th segment. It only needed to last for 3 more breaths of time to burn to the 40th segment. Chu Mu landed on the ground with a pale face. His eyes had an unconcealable look of exhaustion, but there was also a hint of excitement and madness. The surrounding sounds entered Chu Mu's ears and woke him up. He realized that he had already escaped from that place filled with powerful enemies. The strange thing was that his body was filled with sword chi, and there were no injuries on his body. He turned around and looked at the small sword pagoda. Everything that happened just now was like a dream. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a hint of realization. What an incredible place! He sheathed his sword and strode into the crowd, ignoring everyone's gazes. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 183. Amazing! A new student actually lasted until 39 incense sticks in his first challenge of the small sword pagoda. It's incredible. Yes, it's amazing. The first time I challenged the small sword pagoda, I couldn't even last 3 incense sticks. I'm ashamed of myself. Don't talk about you. The first time I challenged the small sword pagoda, I couldn't even last 2 incense sticks. 39 incense sticks. Based on past experience, he should be in the top 120. He might even be in the top 110. What a pity! If he had lasted a little longer, he would have reached the 40th incense stick. He might even be in the top 100. Top 100? Dream on. How can a new student do that? In my opinion, he must have used a trick to last for 39 incense sticks. He only dodged and didn't attack. That's why he could last so long. He won't even be in the top 200. That makes sense. If his movement technique is good, he can indeed last longer if he doesn't attack and only dodges. Yes, similar situations have happened in the past. It makes sense. Chu Mu didn't refute. Only he knew the truth. Indeed, his movement technique was good and he had dodged many times. However, while dodging, he had repeatedly attacked his opponent with his sword. The speed of his attacks was extremely fast. The purple-robed youth, Senior Brother Lei, looked at Chu Mu a few more times. He seemed to want to see what was different about Chu Mu. He was actually able to last until the 39th incense stick in the small sword pagoda challenge. I wonder what my final ranking will be? Will I be able to enter the top 100? Chu Mu thought to himself. Another 100 names appeared on the Iron Sword leaderboard. Another 100 new and old students entered the small sword pagoda for the challenge. None of the students left. Although they had to wait, everyone wanted to know the final result, whether it was their own or others. Finally, the last batch of students entered the small sword pagoda. After a few incense sticks burned, people began to be ejected. When the incense stick burned to the 36th incense stick, the last old student was also ejected. Chu Mu discovered that among all the students participating in the small sword pagoda challenge, only Senior Brother Lei was on the Iron Sword leaderboard. The others were all below the top 100. It's over. The final rankings are coming out. The old students muttered one by one. Their eyes seemed to be sucked in as they stared at the Iron Sword board without blinking. Under the influence of this atmosphere, the hearts of the new students were raised. They held their breaths and stared unblinkingly at the metal sword leaderboard, waiting for the final ranking to appear. On the empty Iron Sword list, a torrent of data suddenly appeared, flashing with countless names. The speed was so fast that no one could see them clearly. However, everyone still stared with their eyes wide open, hoping to see something. Chu Mu realized that although he couldn't see the names clearly, he could still see a series of numbers after each name. That should be the so-called points. Chu Mu thought to himself. Zhuge Ming had told him before that the final ranking of the small sword pagoda wasn't determined by the number of incense sticks one could persevere to, but by the final score. As for the points obtained, it was related to the number of enemies one killed in the small sword pagoda. Chu Mu felt that with the speed at which he killed enemies, the final score he would obtain wouldn't be too little. The names on the Iron Sword leaderboard jumped for about a quarter of an hour before finally stopping at 100 names. From the 201st to the 300th, a total of 100 names were all listed on the Iron Sword leaderboard from top to bottom. Chu Mu swept his gaze over and didn't see his name on the leaderboard. However, Sun Chongfeng, Gao Guling, Huang Fu Bingning and the others were on the leaderboard. Moreover, they were all ranked between the 201st to the 250th. However, Lian Qingyun and Huang Fu Changtian's names didn't appear on the leaderboard. With the number of 100 incense sticks they persevered, it was possible for them to be ranked in the top 200. What's going on? Why isn't my name displayed? A new student asked in astonishment. Only those who enter the top 300 have the qualifications to have their names displayed. The old student beside him explained, and only those who enter the top 100 will have their names displayed on the Iron Sword leaderboard. Then wouldn't those who haven't entered the top 300 be unable to know their results? The new student hurriedly asked. If you haven't entered the top 300, even if you know, what's the use? The old student snorted coldly and said in disdain. The new student was stunned. Thinking carefully, it seemed to be the case. If you couldn't enter the top 300, then even if you knew the rankings, it wouldn't be of much use. You could only work hard to cultivate and strive to break into the top 300 next time. This continued for nearly a minute before the names on the Iron Sword leaderboard flickered and changed without end. After 3 breaths, it once again stabilized and 100 brand new names appeared. This time, there were a total of 100 names from the 101st to the 200th. Lian Qingyun and Huang Fu Changtian's names were ranked at the 185th and the 186th respectively, causing many old students to be astonished. There are 2 outstanding new students in this year's batch. The old students discussed one after another. Li Yingrui was ranked at the 122nd place, an improvement from last time. However, there was still no Chu Mu's name. Junior brother, could it be that you? Luo Yufeng instantly became excited, while Lian Qingyun, Huang Fu Changtian and the rest all revealed an expression of disbelief. This is impossible. Nangong Haoyang and Huang Fu Ba both shook their heads and muttered to themselves. Chu Mu's name wasn't between the 101st to the 300th place, and he persisted until the 39th incense stick before failing. Could this mean that Chu Mu's ranking would enter the top 100? Regardless of which rank he was in the top 100, just being able to enter the top 100 was already the first time in the Great Kuan Sword Mansion's 10 years of history. Even the red-robed deacon looked at Chu Mu with a bright light circulating in his eyes. After a while, the names on the Iron Sword leaderboard flickered again. Everyone's eyes widened even more, afraid that they would miss something. Chu Mu also stared at the Iron Sword leaderboard without blinking. Finally, the 100 names on the Iron Sword leaderboard were stabilized again. Everyone's hearts were instantly hung high, and they didn't dare to breathe out. Chu Mu glanced at it and found his name on the Iron Sword leaderboard. 65th place. That's right, what's the name of this new student? At this point, a senior student finally reacted and asked. I think he's called Chu Mu. A senior student said with uncertainty. Chu Mu. Chu Mu. As they muttered, everyone hurriedly searched the leaderboard. I see it. Someone suddenly let out an earth-shattering scream. His finger pointing at the Iron Sword leaderboard trembled, and his face twitched crazily. The corner of his mouth was about to become crooked. He's actually 65th place. What? Suddenly, everyone looked at the 65th place. Their bodies trembled and their expressions changed. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Many people even rubbed their eyes and looked again. Chu Mu's name was still at 65th place. This is simply inconceivable. Even the purple-robed senior brother lay sucked in a breath of cold air. His ranking was still the same as before. The red-robed deacon looked deeply at Chu Mu and didn't say anything. No one knew what he was thinking. After the shock, there was a cold silence. Everyone was silent, as if they were digesting this incomparably shocking fact. Senior Brother Lei's tiger-like eyes swept over Chu Mu's body, carrying traces of battle intent. It was as if he wanted to challenge Chu Mu. Liang Rui looked at Chu Mu in disbelief, suspecting that he was dreaming. After a full 20 breaths of time, someone gradually whispered again. The top 100 all have their own independent Iron Sword Tower. That's much better than the Iron Sword Tower we live in. A senior student muttered. Senior brother, what do you mean? A new student immediately asked. The top 100 on the Iron Sword leaderboard all have the right to live in their own Iron Sword Tower. An independent Iron Sword Tower is different from our collective Iron Sword Tower. It's much better in all aspects. Moreover, if you enter the top 100, you can obtain more time to cultivate in the Holy Land. This is the most important thing, the senior student said with a face of envy. Is the Holy Land of cultivation very effective? The new student asked, immediately causing the senior students to roll their eyes. You asked a very idiotic question. If the Holy Land of cultivation is not effective, how can it be called a Holy Land of cultivation? The senior student curled his lips and said disdainfully. If that's the case, if Chu Mu obtains more time to cultivate in the Holy Land of cultivation, won't his strength increase faster in the future? The new student exclaimed. He was a pure rookie. Indeed, if you can enter the Holy Land of cultivation to cultivate, your strength increase will be very obvious. The senior student nodded and said, however, if you want to obtain the right to live in your own Iron Sword Tower, you have to challenge it. For example, this Chu Mu obtained the 65th rank. He has the qualifications to challenge the senior brother of the 65th Iron Sword Tower. As long as he defeats his senior brother, he can obtain the right to live in the 65th Iron Sword Tower. This person's rank actually reached 65th, which is above me. I better not challenge him. Otherwise, if I am defeated by him, I will lose the right to live in my own Iron Sword Tower, and the gains will not make up for the losses. Senior Brother Lei stared at Chu Mu for a moment. After thinking for a while, he turned and left. At the same time, he thought to himself, I wonder if he will challenge Xie Donghua. If he does, there will be a good show to watch. The red-robed deacon announced the end of this round of the Small Sword Pagoda's challenge. The next round was still 3 months later. He put away the incense burner, table, and other items, and turned into a red arrow and left. Junior brother, congratulations. Lian Qingyun walked over and said to Chu Mu with a face full of smiles. Nangong Haoyang and Huang Fuba snorted coldly and glanced at Chu Mu before turning and leaving in large strides. Your strength has completely exceeded my expectations. However, I will not let you fall too far behind. Huang Fu Changtian said indifferently and turned to leave as well. Chu Mu smiled at Lian Qingyun and left with Luo Yufeng and the others. The Small Sword Pagoda went into silence once again and waited for 3 months to pass. The news of a new student obtaining the top 100 or even the 65th rank in his first challenge of the Small Sword Pagoda would sweep through the outer mansion like a storm and cause a commotion. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 184. Chu Mu spent a day digesting what he had learned from the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge. Although his cultivation did not improve and his swordsmanship attainments were not profound, he made a breakthrough in his practical application and became more fluent. Moreover, in the face of a continuous stream of strong opponents, he continued to use the phantom steps in actual combat. After a day of consolidation, Chu Mu could already display 8 phantoms. At the same time, Chu Mu's name swept through the entire outer palace like a storm. In the outer palace, apart from those who were in seclusion, everyone else had heard of this name and had a deep impression of it. To be able to obtain 65th place in his first challenge of the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge and leave his name on the Metal Sword leaderboard, Who could enjoy such an honor? In the past 100 years of our great Kuan Sword Mansion, there has never been a case of someone entering the top 100 and leaving his name on the metal sword leaderboard. Even 100 years ago, such a situation rarely occurred. This new student called Chu Mu is not bad at all. Continue to observe him. In a unique sword tower in the outer palace, a dignified middle-aged man spoke slowly. His tone carried some importance and admiration. Yes, palace master. Standing below was a red-robed man. It was the red-robed deacon who had previously presided over the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Senior Brother Chu, there are people outside who wish to see you. Shen Tao stood outside Chu Mu's room and spoke softly. He and Zhou Yi had become Chu Mu's sword attendants. Who is it? Chu Mu's voice came from inside the room. It's Senior Brother Lian Qingyun and the others, Shen Tao said. Oh, let them in, Chu Mu said after thinking for a while. Okay. Shen Tao immediately went downstairs while Chu Mu opened the door and walked out. Zhang Qingwei wasn't here. Chu Mu had instantly obtained 65th place, causing Zhang Qingwei to be extremely alarmed and inwardly rejoice. Thankfully, there wasn't any deep enmity between him and Chu Mu. It was merely a conflict that could be resolved. Not long after, Shen Tao went upstairs with 3 people following behind him: Lian Qingyun, Nangong Haoyang, and Shen Rao. The seductive Shen Rao's beautiful eyes fell directly on Chu Mu's body. She was 3 parts curious and 3 parts seductive. It was as if she wanted to see through Chu Mu. Normally, when faced with her gaze, even if they didn't blush, they would feel a little uncomfortable. However, Chu Mu's face was indifferent, as if he didn't feel anything at all. Even the look in his eyes didn't change at all. This made Shen Rao feel frustrated and at the same time, aroused her desire. Why are the 3 of you looking for me? Chu Mu glanced at them, nodded, and said lightly. Junior brother, do you know that the outside world has become very lively because of you? Everyone is talking about you, junior brother, Lian Qingyun said. There was a bit of emotion in his voice, as well as a bit of envy that even he himself could not detect. It's just a temporary limelight. Before Chu Mu could answer, Nangong Haoyang said. You're right. Chu Mu nodded and didn't refute. Other than the burden and trouble of having a false reputation, there were no other benefits. Shen Rao didn't say anything. She just stared at Chu Mu. Her beautiful eyes moved around as if she was competing with Chu Mu. Junior brother, we came to find you because we have something important to discuss. Lian Qingyun opened his mouth and went straight to the point. I believe that by now, junior brother should have some understanding of how low the status of the new students is in the Great Kuan Sword Mansion. There will be old students who will casually bully us. Of course, since junior brother has left his name on the metal sword list, there won't be any old students who are blind enough to provoke junior brother. Chu Mu nodded. He could vaguely guess the purpose of Lian Qingyun and the other two's visit. However, other than junior brother, the new students who enter the Great Kuan Sword Mansion are not as strong as the old students. They are simply no match for the old students. Lian Qingyun continued in an impassioned tone. As a member of the new students, we share a common enemy. I will definitely not allow the new students to continue being bullied. Therefore, we new students must unite and stick together. Only in this way can we resist the old students and not be at a disadvantage. Brother Qingyun is right, Nangong Haoyang said. He looked at Chu Mu and said, Chu Mu, we new students have formed an alliance called the Qingyun Alliance. Brother Qingyun will be the leader of the alliance. Our goal is to invite you to join the Qingyun Alliance. I believe that you won't refuse and can't refuse. Junior brother, although I'm now the alliance leader of the Qingyun Alliance, the alliance leader should be someone who is stronger and more prestigious. With junior brother's strength and prestige, you're more suitable to be the alliance leader than me. Lian Qingyun hurriedly said with a sincere face. As a new student, unity is necessary. Junior brother, as long as you agree, you will immediately become the leader of the Qingyun alliance. Nangong Haoyang and Shen Rao stared at Chu Mu, waiting for Chu Mu's reply. Thank you for your kind intentions, senior brother. However, senior brother is more suitable to be the leader than me, Chu Mu said. Lien Qingyun's eyes flashed with a trace of satisfaction. Although he said that he would give the position of the leader to Chu Mu, the entire Qingyun alliance was built by him. How could he be willing to give up the position of the leader? If that's the case, then junior brother will be the deputy leader. Lien Qingyun smiled. Nangong Haoyang snorted. He was also the deputy leader. I have no intention of joining the Qingyun alliance, Chu Mu said faintly. Lien Qingyun and the other two's expressions changed slightly. Junior brother, what do you mean? Lien Qingyun's tone was slightly stiff. I have no intention of participating in the confrontation between the new and old students. Chu Mu said neither slowly nor quickly. I was bullied because my skills were not as good as others. Only when I am strong enough can I face everything. Instead of spending my time on how to fight, I would rather invest my time in endless cultivation to improve my cultivation and strength. Chu Mu, are you really not going to give us any face? Nangong Haoyang's face darkened as he snorted coldly. My heart is like my sword. Chu Mu glanced at Nangong Haoyang and replied faintly. You! Nangong Haoyang slammed the table and stood up abruptly. The fiery aura around him fluctuated continuously as he glared at Chu Mu. Enough! Lien Qingyun pressed on Nangong Haoyang's shoulder and looked at Chu Mu. He squeezed out a smile and said, Since junior brother is unwilling to join the Qingyun alliance, we will not force you. I believe that with junior brother's strength, the old students will not dare to provoke you. However, I have a request. If the Qingyun alliance needs junior brother's help, I hope junior brother can lend a hand. I will not let junior brother's help in vain. Okay. Chu Mu did not refuse. Since Lien Qingyun had already said so, if he still refused, it would be equivalent to standing on the opposite side of Lien Qingyun. This would be unnecessary trouble for Chu Mu. Since that is the case, we will take our leave first, Lien Qingyun said. Before leaving, Shen Rao turned around and looked at Chu Mu. There was a strange light in her beautiful eyes, as if she wanted to imprint Chu Mu deeply in her mind. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 185. The storm created by Chu Mu hadn't even stopped when a new round of storm swept over. Have you heard? Chu Mu, who got 65th place in the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge, actually applied to challenge senior brother Xie Donghua. I've heard about this for a long time. This is going to be interesting. I wonder if this Chu Mu can defeat senior brother Xie. I don't think so. Chu Mu is just a new student. I heard that he was only at the peak of the 10th stage when he first entered the Sword Mansion. Although he is now at the half-step Qi transformation realm, he should have just broken through. Moreover, senior brother Xie currently has a half-step Qi transformation peak sword aura cultivation. Just in terms of cultivation, he can suppress Chu Mu. The reason why he hasn't broken through to the Qi transformation realm is because he wants to comprehend 30% of his wind concept. Analyzed an older student. That makes sense. I heard that senior brother Xie Donghua's wind concept has already reached 20% and is about to break through to 30%. Once senior brother Xie's wind concept reaches 30%, he will begin to break through to the Qi transformation realm. After that, he will be able to become an inner mansion disciple and enjoy more cultivation resources. Although I don't think Chu Mu is a match for senior brother Xie, Chu Mu is definitely not weak since he got 65th place in the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle. He should be able to have an exciting battle with senior brother Xie. What Zhuge Ming had said before was about the situation of independent sword towers. Independent sword towers referred to sword towers where one person lived. In the entire outer mansion, There were only 100 independent sword towers out of thousands of sword towers. They were occupied by hundreds of iron sword ranking disciples, which made them different. Not to mention the internal facilities of an independent sword tower, just living in an independent sword tower was a privilege that made people envious. Whether it was Zhuge Ming's suggestion or Chu Mu's own idea, he needed an independent sword tower to live in. It would be more convenient for his cultivation. Therefore, Chu Mu wanted to challenge Xie Donghua of the 65th Sword Tower. A challenge was not something that could be issued as and when it was approved. It would be presided over by the deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs to avoid disputes after the challenge. Taking the fake clear wind sword, Chu Mu left the sword tower and headed in the direction of the Hundred Affair Hall. A figure also walked out of the number 65 sword tower. He carried a fake sword on his back and his eyes were extremely sharp as he strode towards the Hall of Hundred Affairs. Junior Marshal Brother Xie, what do you think about this Chu Mu who wants to challenge you? A man walked out of another independent sword tower and asked with a strange smile on his face. I will use my sword to shatter his fantasy, Xie Donghua said indifferently. His footsteps quickened and his figure was like the wind. Not far from the Hall of Hundred Affairs, there was a 1-meter-high battle arena. Many people had gathered around the arena. When Chu Mu arrived, there were at least 2,000 people surrounding the arena. Make way, everyone make way. Senior Brother Chu is here. Zhou Ian Shun Tao squeezed into the crowd and shouted. Who is Senior Brother Chu? Why should I make way for him? Senior Brother Chu is Chu Mu. If you don't make way for him, do you want to enter the battle arena? Immediately, when they heard that it was Chu Mu, they all made way for Chu Mu to pass through. Leaping into the air, he landed on the battle arena and stood still, waiting for Xie Donghua's arrival. Lei Zhen was also in the crowd. He naturally would not let go of such a good show. Other than Lei Zhen, there were also many students on the metal sword list who had arrived. That is Senior Brother Wang Qianxi, ranked 73rd on the metal sword list, and Senior Brother Rengai, ranked 63rd. Normally, it is very difficult to see these senior brothers. I didn't expect that this challenge would attract them all. I want to see the top 10 senior brothers the most. Unfortunately, this kind of scene is not enough to attract them. Nonsense, the top 30 is already different from the top 100, let alone the top 10. Unless it is also a battle between the top 10, it will not arouse their interest. Amidst the discussion, Xie Donghua arrived. He glanced at the dense crowd and lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. Immediately, he soared into the sky like an eagle riding the wind. There were too many people, and the battle arena was at least 100 meters away. Even a Qi transformation realm martial artist would not be able to fly 100 meters in one breath. In the air, Xie Donghua waved his sleeves, and his sword Qi was like an eagle's wings flapping in the air, creating bursts of explosive sounds. Using this as leverage, Xie Donghua waved his sleeves 4 times and landed steadily on the battle arena, facing Chu Mu. His face was not red, and he was not out of breath, showing his long Qi meridians and deep sword Qi cultivation. The mentality of wind. Chu Mu squinted his eyes slightly. The moment Xie Donghua landed on the ground, he could feel it very clearly. Less than 30%. If it was any other mentality, and I did not use 30% of my wind mentality, he would be able to fight with me. Unfortunately, it is the mentality of wind. The challenge begins. The deacon of the Hundred Affair Hall on the side shouted, flying back and landing on the battle arena. Xie Donghua did not say a word. His eyes became extremely sharp, like a sword light cutting through the air, piercing through Chu Mu. In one breath, he unsheathed his sword, and the sword turned into a breeze as he slashed out. At the same time, Chu Mu attacked with his sword. The speed of his sword was extremely fast, like a breeze blowing by. Xie Donghua's pupils shrank, and he was secretly surprised. This person was like him, using a wind sword art. I did not expect this Chu Mu to also be a wind cultivator. Looks like the result is already decided. Wang Qianxi said. That's right. Xie Donghua has already comprehended 20% of his wind mentality, and he has a chance to break through to 30% within a year. His sword qi cultivation has reached the peak, and his wind sword art is extremely exquisite. Even if I want to win against him, it will take a lot of effort. Ren Gai crossed his arms in front of his chest and said slowly, if this Chu Mu was a wind cultivator, it would be worth watching. But since he is a wind cultivator, he will be completely suppressed by Xie Donghua. Let's see how many moves he can take. Obviously, Xie Donghua also thought so. One sword after another, like a gust of wind, turned into a sharp and cold attack towards Chu Mu. As soon as he attacked, Xie Donghua used his best wind-breaking sword art. Every sword was like a gust of wind, and the air seemed to shatter, letting out bursts of explosive sounds. It was extremely powerful. Chu Mu counterattacked, using his wind sword art. In terms of power, the wind sword art was not as powerful as the wind-breaking sword art. But Chu Mu had already cultivated the wind sword art to completion, and he could control it as he wished. Xie Donghua's wind-breaking sword art was only Deshang's, and was still a step away from completion. Therefore, the difference in power between the two was not that obvious. The wind-type sword technique's basic moves collided. Chu Mu and Xie Donghua leapt like rabbits and swooped down like a falcon. Their bodies changed as they passed by each other, and they quickly turned around to attack. Their speed was extremely fast, and their sword auras tore through the air. A light cyan color burst forth, and sparks flew in all directions. How exciting! I did not expect that Chu Mu, who cultivates wind element sword arts, could actually fight with senior brother Xie to such an intense degree. Humph, isn't it because senior brother Xie did not use his wind mentality? Once he uses it, the power of his wind-breaking sword art will increase by several folds. At that time, he will be able to defeat Chu Mu with just a few sword moves. I don't think so. For Chu Mu to be able to get 65th place, he must have also comprehended a mentality. As for what kind of mentality it is, I have no idea. If it is also the wind mentality, then it will be fun. He will definitely be suppressed by senior brother Xie. Chu Mu's sword arts were exquisite. During the basic attacks, he changed his sword moves at an extremely fast speed. Each of his sword moves were the basic moves of the wind sword art, but there was also a sense of transcendence within, which made the basic moves of the wind sword art even more unpredictable. After a few exchanges, Xie Donghua realized that he could not beat Chu Mu at all. On the contrary, he was being controlled by the latter, and the rhythm of the battle was gradually being controlled by him. What an amazing sword art level! Since that is the case, I will bring out my true power. Xie Donghua thought to himself. A light blue light flashed through his pupils like wind, and a gust of wind appeared out of nowhere, blowing around his body. Once he threw out his sword, Xie Donghua's sword speed suddenly increased, becoming even faster. The wind condensed on the sword body, causing it to shine with a light blue light. It tore through the air and stabbed towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu's body flashed as he performed the phantom step. 8 phantoms appeared all of a sudden, alternating with each other. It was hard to tell which was real and which was fake. It is the phantom steps. Wang Qianxi was shocked. He has also trained to the level of 8 phantoms. Impressive. Rengai also exclaimed with his eyes wide open. Senior brother Lei was even more surprised. Under the 8 phantoms, Xie Donghua could not tell which one was Chu Mu's real body. No matter how fast his sword was, it would not be able to form an effective attack. You forced me to do this. You asked for it. Xie Donghua snorted coldly. His sword paused and a gust of wind blew out. He rushed forward and let out a low growl. Sword chi surged as he threw out a sword attack. 100 wind breaking shadows. The sound of air being torn was heard. Beams of light blue sword shadows condensed in the air and shot out, instantly turning into hundreds of sword shadows and covering the area of 10 meters in front of him. A couple of phantoms were shattered and dissipated. 100 sword shadows swept in all directions, their terrifying sharpness closing in on Chu Mu. Chu Mu's figure changed between advancing and retreating as he pleased. In an instant, phantom step and wind travel merged together, becoming even more profound and unfathomable. The sword in his hand pierced out, lightly touching the air. Xie Donghua was shocked. He could feel that his 100 wind-breaking shadows killing move was about to collapse. Wind-shaking forest. Under the attack of the weak point, Xie Donghua's killing move was not stable. The sword chi clashed and its power decreased drastically. Seizing the opportunity, Chu Mu performed his wind sword spell-killing move, infusing it with 20% of the wind mentality. The wind howled and roared, blowing through the forest. It blew Xie Donghua's sword shadow away like smoke, blowing towards Xie Donghua. Scatter! With a sudden shout, Xie Donghua activated all of his wind mentality, wanting to scatter the wind-shaking forest. However, he was shocked to find that the wind was still blowing at him, not decreasing in power at all. Chu Mu's sword appeared right after the wind and was placed on Xie Donghua's neck. "You lost," Chu Mu said as he put his sword back into its scabbard. "I lost." Xie Donghua's face was filled with disbelief. The surrounding people were also silent, unable to accept the fact in front of them. This change was way too fast. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 186. The reason why Xie Donghua lost was firstly because he cultivated wind-type sword techniques and comprehended the concept of wind. On this point, he was already inferior to Chu Mu. Secondly, he'd misjudged Chu Mu's strength, causing him to be unable to bring forth his full strength. In the end, he was defeated by Chu Mu. Xie Donghua believed that if they were to fight again, he would definitely not be defeated so quickly. But a defeat was a defeat. According to the rules, he wasn't allowed to challenge Chu Mu for a month. After a month, he could pay a price to challenge Chu Mu again. At that time, he would challenge Chu Mu and seize back the sword pavilion. Chu Mu defeated Xie Donghua under the supervision of the deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall and under the witness of over 3,000 new and old students. Chu Mu had once again caused a stir in the outer court. The uproar caused by him challenging the small sword pagoda hadn't died down yet, and a new wave of uproar from defeating Xie Donghua surged over once more. It could be said that one wave had yet to die down when another wave arose. Damn it! Huang Fuba crushed the cup in his hand. He'd always remembered the humiliation of being defeated by Chu Mu with a single sword strike, and he'd always wanted to turn the tables. But never had he imagined that Chu Mu would reveal a terrifying edge as soon as he entered the sword mansion. Even Huang Fu Changtian was unable to compare to Chu Mu, so his hopes of turning the tables had completely failed. Don't be disheartened. We're disciples of the imperial family. With our natural talent and coupled with the fact that we've become the preparatory members of the Heaven King Hall, I believe we'll be able to improve our strength even faster. Once our cultivations break through to the energy transformation realm, we'll immediately become official members of the Heaven King Hall. At that time, we'll be able to obtain even more cultivation resources and improve even faster. Catching up to and surpassing Chu Mu isn't impossible. Huang Funing was relatively calm as he analyzed. Huang Fu Changtian, Huang Fu Bingning, and Huang Fu Shuaidai didn't say anything. Actually, they felt that surpassing Chu Mu was absolutely not a simple matter, and it was extremely difficult or even impossible. After all, they would improve, but it was impossible for Chu Mu to remain stagnant. People like him who couldn't see the depth of their abilities were the most dreaded. No one knew if Chu Mu would improve 3 points if they improved 1 point. I have to work hard as well. I can't let the gap between me and junior brother get too big, Luo Yufeng said to himself. It was as if they had been stimulated by Chu Mu. Many of the new students wholeheartedly immersed themselves in their cultivation. Many of the old students were also stimulated and worked even harder in their cultivation, forming a good atmosphere. According to Senior Brother Zhuge, the function of the cultivation Holy Land is to speed up the comprehension of intent realms. Those who have not comprehended intent realms can also comprehend intent realms from there. However, the cultivation Holy Land is only effective for concepts below 40%. Once a concept reaches 40%, the cultivation Holy Land will be powerless, Chu Mu said to himself. Now that my comprehension of the concept of wind has reached 43%, the cultivation Holy Land is of no help to me. However, my comprehension of the concept of gold and cloud has yet to reach 30%. I can borrow the effects of the cultivation Holy Land to speed up my comprehension. While thinking to himself, Chu Mu once again went down and left the sword tower. Now, the concept of the 65th sword tower belonged to Chu Mu. This sword tower still had 2 floors, but the area was much bigger. The second floor also did not have any room partitions. Although the layout was also very simple, it gave people a different feeling. It was much more delicate and had a sense of texture. In addition, for some unknown reason, the spirit chi inside the sword tower was 50% denser than the other collective sword towers. Under such nourishment for a long time, it would definitely be more beneficial to one's body. As for the meals, there were also people from the 1,000 Cuisine Courtyard in charge of them. All kinds of treatment were indeed incomparable to the collective sword tower. The entrance to the cultivation Holy Land was in the northeast corner of the outer palace. It was specially guarded by the outer palace elder. You are Chu Mu? The elder in charge of the cultivation Holy Land's entrance looked deeply at Chu Mu, as if he wanted to see what was different about Chu Mu. Chu Mu nodded. Ranked 65th on the Iron Sword list, you have 45 hours to use the cultivation Holy Land in these 3 months. The elder retracted his gaze and said slowly, Which cultivation Holy Land do you want to enter? White Cloud Fairy, Chu Mu said without hesitation. There were a total of 12 cultivation Holy Lands in the Sword Mansion. They were Still Water, Ice Cave, Thousand Musen, Lava Pool, Thunder Valley, Gale Cliff, White Cloud Fairy, Earth Wasteland, Golden Sword Tomb, Pure Yuan Pavilion, Polar Light Pavilion, and Black Demon Abyss. Still Water comprehended the concept of water, Ice Cave comprehended the concept of ice, Thousand Musen comprehended the concept of wood, Lava Pool comprehended the concept of fire, Thunder Valley comprehended the concept of thunder, Gale Cliff comprehended the concept of wind, White Cloud Fairy comprehended the concept of clouds, Earth Wasteland comprehended the concept of earth, and Golden Sword Tomb comprehended the concept of metal. Pure Yuan Pavilion was more special. It was a holy land to cultivate sword chi. It had nothing to do with the concept. It was said that the spirit chi in Pure Yuan Pavilion was incomparably pure and abundant. Most importantly, unlike other places, the spirit chi could be absorbed into the body and transformed into sword chi. Polar Light Pavilion comprehended the concept of light, while Black Demon Abyss comprehended the concept of darkness. White Cloud Fairy. The elder nodded, took out a sword token and handed it to Chu Mu. He then pointed to the light door behind him and said, Take the sword token and walk in. You will be sent to White Cloud Fairy. Thank you, Elder, Chu Mu said. He took the sword token and walked into the light door and disappeared. It is said that Chu Mu also displayed the concept of wind when he defeated Xie Donghua. Why did he not enter Gale Cliff but enter White Cloud Fairy? The elder stared at the light door and thought to himself, could it be that Chu Mu has already comprehended the concept of wind to the pinnacle of 30%? Or could it be that although his concept of wind has not reached the pinnacle of 30%, he has also comprehended the concept of clouds? If it is the former, it means that Chu Mu's comprehension is very high. If it is the latter, it is even more incredible. Could there really be a second student who has comprehended two concepts in the outer mansion? The elder thought for a long time but could not come to a conclusion. This matter must be reported to the mansion master. As soon as he walked into the light door, Chu-Mu only felt that he was wrapped in a strange power. This power seemed to sweep through Chu-Mu's body and finally locked onto the sword token in his hand. The sword token also burst forth with a power that mixed with the strange power. Then, Chu-Mu felt that the sky and earth were spinning. Before he could react, his eyes were filled with a vast expanse of whiteness. This place. A look of astonishment flashed across Chu-Mu's face. He found that he was standing on a white cloud, and all he could see were white clouds floating slowly. Is this White Cloud Fairy? It was a very magical place. There was no land, no trees, only endless white clouds. The floating white clouds did not have any pattern. They may float from the left or from the right. When they collided with each other, they may both disperse, or they may merge to become a larger white cloud. After the dispersing white clouds, there were still wisps of cloud energy left. Then, the wisps of cloud energy would reappear and gather to form a white cloud. This beautiful and unpredictable scene instantly attracted Chu-Mu's attention. His eyes didn't even blink as he gradually immersed himself in it, unable to extricate himself. Where did the white clouds of White Cloud Fairy come from? Chu-Mu did not know, nor did he want to know. This was not a question that he needed to think about. Perhaps, only after comprehending the concept of clouds to perfection and breaking through, surpassing the level of the concept, would he have the qualifications to peek into the mysteries within. And now, Chu-Mu's mind was gradually drawn in. He forgot everything else and eliminated all distracting thoughts. He was fully focused on White Cloud Fairy. He wanted to feel the fluttering of the white clouds, feel the collision of the white clouds, feel the collapse of the white clouds, feel the fusion of the white clouds, feel the convergence of the white cloud. Completely subconsciously, the sword in his hand jumped out and landed in his hand. Chu-Mu used his sword arts purely by instinct. However, if other people were to watch from the side, they would discover that Chu-Mu's flying cloud sword technique seemed to be the same, but was faintly different. There was a faint shadow of the flying cloud sword technique within, but it was even more profound and unfathomable. The flying cloud sword art was the first sword art that Chu-Mu came into contact with after coming to this world. He had already thoroughly comprehended it. Now that he was able to sense it by observing the clouds, he was able to execute it. His 21% concept of clouds merged into it, dancing with the sea of clouds, creating a unique flavor. He practiced the sword techniques over and over again, from the flying cloud sword technique to the soft cloud sword technique to the following cloud sword technique to the rolling cloud sword technique. Then, he performed the incomplete cloud sea sword technique and cloud shattering sword technique. In the end, he unleashed the cloud shattering sword explosion. The cloud sword chi pierced through the void and shot out in all directions. In this place, the power of the cloud sword arts and sword skills was greatly enhanced. After performing the cloud-shattering sword explosion, Chu-Mu maintained his sword stance and did not move. His eyes turned from sharp to gentle. The white ripples turned into wisps of cloud and flowed through his eyes slowly. Clouds form, clouds gather, clouds disperse, clouds disappear. This is the law and mystery of clouds. All kinds of thoughts appeared and circulated in his mind. All kinds of comprehensions appeared. Chu-Mu only felt that the concept of clouds that he usually found hard to improve was starting to loosen up and deepen bit by bit. After a while, Chu-Mu waved his sword casually. It was purely an instinct. He did not perform any sword arts or sword skills. He was just like a child waving a tree branch randomly. However, as Chu-Mu waved his sword, wisps of cloud were produced from the tip of the sword. They slowly floated around and quickly formed an outline. What was strange was that these wisps of cloud did not form into white clouds. Instead, they were like threads that wrapped around Chu Mu's surroundings. They were like silk wrapping around Chu Mu's body. As the sword paused, the wisps of cloud also paused before they all dispersed. Concept of clouds. Concept of clouds. Chu Mu muttered to himself. He withdrew his sword and stood up. There was a trace of absent-mindedness in his eyes. The white cloud under his feet slowly floated forward and collided with the other white clouds. However, what was strange was that this white cloud did not disperse or merge with the other white cloud. It was like a reinforced white cloud that was rampaging and crushing everything. Unknowingly, Chu Mu's concept of clouds had increased from 21% to 22%. Chu Mu was still immersed in his comprehension. Sometimes he stood still, sometimes he waved his sword, sometimes he jumped up and spun in the air. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 187. According to the rules of the Sword Mansion, all students who participated in the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle were eligible to enter the Cultivation Sacred Land to comprehend the concept. However, students who were not in the top 100 were only allowed 8 hours every 3 months. It was very short, and it was often difficult to make significant progress. Only those who entered the top 100 and were listed on the Iron Sword ranking battle would have more time. For example, the 100th place would have 20 hours to use the Cultivation Sacred Land, the 99th place would have 20 hours, and so on. Chu Mu, who was in the 65th place, would have 45 hours. However, according to Chu Mu's understanding, there was a clear difference between the 31st and 30th place. The 31st place had 78 hours to use the Cultivation Sacred Land, while the 30th place had a clear increase, reaching 90 hours. When it came to the 11th place and the 10th place, there was another difference. Therefore, on the Iron Sword ranking battle, the names of the 1st to the 10th place were golden, the names of the 11th to the 30th place were silver, and the names of the 31st to the 100th place were red. Since the first time he entered the White Cloud Fairy to comprehend the concept of clouds, Chu Mu would enter the White Cloud Fairy almost every day. Sometimes, he would enter the White Cloud Fairy one day apart. 45 hours was not long at all. In fact, it was very short. However, there were more than 4,000 students in the Outer Mansion, and everyone had the opportunity to enter the Cultivation Sacred Land. On average, there were at least a few hundred people who entered the White Cloud Fairy. Finally, another month passed. Within this month, Chu Mu's 45 hours had been used up. If he wanted to enter the Cultivation Sacred Land, he could only wait until the next Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle. The Cultivation Sacred Land's effect is really too good. I have already comprehended 29% of the concept of cloud. What a pity! If I had a few more hours, I would definitely have been able to comprehend 30%. Chu Mu thought to himself as he left the White Cloud Fairy. After bidding farewell to the Guardian Elder of the Cultivation Sacred Land, he returned to the 65th Sword Tower. From the looks of it, we can be sure that this Chu Mu has indeed grasped too intense. The Guardian Elder looked at Chu Mu's departing figure and secretly said with certainty, Chu Mu, who had just left the White Cloud Fairy, had not completely calmed down his concept of clouds. A normal sword practitioner might not be able to sense it, but the Guardian Elder had a profound cultivation base, and his own concept of clouds had also reached minor accomplishment. Naturally, he could distinguish it. However, he was unable to discern what level Chu Mu had comprehended the concept of clouds, unless Chu Mu was willing to display it. As soon as he returned to number 65 Sword Tower, he saw a deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs turn around and walk towards him. His eyes lit up when he saw Chu Mu. Chu Mu, Xie Donghua has applied for a challenge. I'm here to inform you that tomorrow afternoon, you and Xie Donghua will have a showdown in the arena outside the Hall of Hundred Affairs. The deacon got straight to the point. All right. Chu Mu was not surprised at all. He nodded and said, Thank you for your trouble. This is my duty. The deacon smiled and said, All right, I won't disturb you any longer. I hope you can still win tomorrow. I will. Chu-mu nodded and did not take Xie Donghua's challenge to heart. Unless Xie Donghua could also comprehend 40% of the concept of wind, he would lose for sure. 29% of the concept of clouds. It's getting harder and harder to comprehend it outside. It seems that I can only wait until the next round of the small sword pagoda ranking battle to obtain more time. After entering the sword tower, Chu-mu went straight to the second floor. After putting down the fake sword, he found a comfortable position and casually pulled out a book from the bookshelf and opened it. These books were all from the Sword Palace. They were not secret manuals of cultivation techniques, but books on culture, geography, customs, and so on. He could read them when he was free to increase his knowledge. Oh right. As Chu-mu read, an idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He quickly closed the book and carefully recalled what Zhuge Ming had said. It seems, as long as I defeat Xie Donghua tomorrow, I will be able to obtain some time in the sacred cultivation ground. I hope Xie Donghua's time hasn't been used up yet. In the blink of an eye, a day passed and the next day arrived. In the afternoon, many people immediately gathered at the sword battle arena. The top 10 of the Iron Sword rankings still did not appear. However, there was one person in the top 30. Han Ao, ranked 29th, had an arrogant expression. His striking aquiline nose gave him a natural arrogance. In addition to Han Ao, more people from the Iron Sword ranking appeared. There were more than 20 of them standing together and chatting. On the sword battle arena, Xie Donghua had already arrived. He closed his eyes and quietly waited for Chu-mu's arrival. He was not affected by the surrounding discussions at all. Chu-mu's arrival was discovered by some sharp-eyed people. They immediately opened up a gap for Chu-mu to pass through. After a few leaps, Chu-mu jumped onto the stage and faced Xie Donghua. You will definitely lose this battle. Xie Donghua opened his eyes. A cyan chi vortex revolved as he spoke with incomparable certainty. If you have the cultivation of the chi transformation realm, then this sentence can be realized. Chu-mu retorted. Let's see who's the real deal. Xie Donghua let out a long whistle. Like a gale, he unsheathed his sword. He lowered his body and held the sword in his hand. It was as if the sword in his hand had transformed into a gale and rushed out, faster than last time. Chu-mu was locked in place. Before Xie Donghua arrived, he directly used the killing move 100 wind-breaking shadows. This killing move's power was even stronger than last time, and its speed was even faster. Even more powerful. Not bad. It seems that only with pressure comes motivation. 2 students on the Iron Sword ranking discussed. Phantom step. 9 shadows alternated between each other, confusing the eyes. What? Last month he only had 8 shadows. Now he's actually cultivated 9 shadows. Doesn't that mean he's about to reach perfection? Perfection is not that easy. The 5 shadows were immediately destroyed by the 100 wind-breaking shadows. However, Chu-mu strangely appeared behind Xie Donghua. His sword stirred up a gale and slashed out. Xie Donghua's body moved, floating to the side. He turned around and slashed out with his sword. Sword chi split the air. The tip of his sword shattered the sword aura, and Chu-mu borrowed the momentum to retreat while casting wind travel. Drawing an arc in the air, he landed on the ground and cast phantom steps again. 9 phantoms overlapped and confused Xie Donghua again. His speed was fast, and his reaction was even faster. Xie Donghua waved his sword and slashed out dozens of sword chi, covering the entire arena. Chu-mu was like a fish shuttling through the sword chi. His sword was as fast as lightning as it pierced towards Xie Donghua. A cold star rapidly enlarged in Xie Donghua's eyes. With a clanging sound, sparks flew. Chu-mu's sword hit Xie Donghua's sword that he had blocked in time. Sword chi exploded, and Xie Donghua quickly flew back. However, Chu Mu's sword continued to press forward. With a light flick of his wrist, the sword vibrated. A slight vibration power penetrated the tip of the sword. Sword chi exploded, shaking Xie Donghua's sword away. With the phantom steps, Xie Donghua came back to his senses. He felt his hair stand on end. A cold chill descended on his body. The pores on his neck opened up and goosebumps appeared. There was no way to retreat. If he retreated, he would fall off the arena. His eyes flashed with a hint of sharpness as he waved his sword to counterattack. With a clanging sound and sparks flying, Xie Donghua only felt his palm shaking. His sword paused for a moment. A shadow flashed in front of his eyes. There was a sword on his neck. The coldness of the sword penetrated his skin, making him shiver. I've lost. Xie Donghua's face was gloomy. This time, he had made ample preparations, and his strength had increased. However, he still lost. He finally understood that although Chu Mu's sword chi cultivation was not as good as his, the difference was not that big. In terms of the purity of his sword chi, he wasn't the slightest bit inferior. Moreover, his comprehension of the concept of wind was probably above his own. Moreover, his sword technique was more profound than his own. His sword speed was faster than his own, and so on. However, it could be considered as one more goal to chase after. It was more motivation. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 188. The white clouds were boundless, forming and dispersing. As the saying goes, the clouds are just like the mist in front of your eyes. Standing on a white cloud, Chu Mu drifted around aimlessly. His eyes reflected the sea of clouds, and his pupils seemed to have turned into two groups of slowly rotating white clouds. Immersed in a deep level of comprehension, time slowly passed. All kinds of mysteries about the clouds appeared in his mind bit by bit. His comprehension of the clouds deepened little by little. Unknowingly, Chu Mu felt his body tremble. The rotating white clouds in his eyes suddenly exploded and rushed in all directions. A kind of comprehension of the clouds instantly appeared in his mind. In an instant, the white cloud under his feet suddenly accelerated and rushed forward, crushing all the clouds and shattering them into nothingness. So that's how it is. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with understanding. He nodded slightly and took out the sword token of the cultivation sacred ground and left the white cloud fairy. Chu Mu, you still have 10 hours. The guardian elder of the cultivation sacred ground took back the sword token and said, Yes, thank you, elder. Chu Mu said, I will take my leave first. I wonder what level his comprehension of the concept of clouds has reached? The elder muttered to himself. Now that I have comprehended 30% of the concept of clouds, I still have 10 hours to use the cultivation sacred ground. As he walked back to his sword tower, Chu Mu pondered, these 10 hours are the last 10 hours before the next round of small sword pagoda ranking battles. I don't need to go to the Gale Cliff or the White Cloud Fairy. The only places left are the Gold Sword Tomb and the Pure Essence Pavilion. The 20 hours were obtained by Chu Mu after defeating Xie Donghua again. It was similar to a spoil of war. Chu Mu had applied to challenge Xie Donghua. After Xie Donghua was defeated, he had a chance to challenge Chu Mu 1 month later. However, he had to pay a price. The price was the use of the cultivation sacred ground, 20 hours. The other people's time arrangement in the cultivation sacred ground was different from Chu Mu's. Every time they entered the cultivation sacred ground, they would need a certain amount of time to consolidate. Chu Mu directly skipped this process. There was a person standing in front of Sword Tower number 65. When Chu Mu approached, that person turned around and stared at Chu Mu. Chu Mu, you're finally back. Liang Rue heaved a sigh of relief. Why are you looking for me? Chu Mu asked. 2 things. First, thank you for showing mercy last time. Liang Rue went straight to the point. When he saw Chu Mu defeat Xie Donghua twice with his own eyes, he was very clear that he was definitely not Chu Mu's opponent. The second thing is, I am a member of the Proud Sword Gang. Your strength has been recognized by the gang, so I am here to invite you to join the gang and become a member. Don't be in a hurry to refuse. Although our sect cannot be compared to the 1 hall, 2 pavilions, and 3 alliances, we are not weak at all when compared to other organizations. Liang Rui did not wait for Chu Mu's reply and quickly said, with your talent and strength, once you join the gang, you will immediately become an official member and be valued. In the future, you will be able to receive more credits as rewards and other cultivation resources. It will definitely allow your strength to increase even faster. Thank you for your kindness, but I have no plans to join any organization. Chu Mu's expression did not change as he replied indifferently. You have to think carefully. Liang Rui frowned. His tone was not threatening, but it would not make people feel comfortable either. Rejecting is not a good thing for you. On the contrary, you might offend someone you shouldn't offend and cause unnecessary trouble. I have already said it clearly enough. Chu Mu said, no longer paying attention to Liang Rui. He walked past from the side and entered the sword tower. Liang Rui stared at Chu Mu's back for a while until Chu Mu walked into the sword tower and could no longer be seen. If Han Ao knew that his invitation was rejected, with his temper, he would definitely not let it go. Muttering to himself, Liang Rui turned and left. He was just a messenger. Ao Jian Gang. Walking to the second floor of the sword tower, Chu Mu sat down and muttered. Immediately, he threw the matter of the Ao Jian Gang to the back of his mind. Trouble? So what? Not liking trouble did not mean that he was afraid of trouble. If someone wanted to find trouble with him, Chu Mu would definitely not be bullied. His counterattack would be incomparably fierce and leave a deep impression on the other party. The power of the cloud-shattering sword explosion under 30% of the concept of clouds has increased a lot. If I challenge the small sword pagoda with my current strength, I believe that I can get a higher ranking. Chu Mu thought to himself, why don't I go to the Pure Yuan Pavilion for 4 hours to test the effect? After making a decision, Chu Mu rested. Until the next morning, he did not cultivate the Shang Yuan sword chi technique. He directly left the sword tower and went to the gate of the cultivation sanctuary again. Having been here many times, Chu Mu was quite familiar with the guardian elder. Chu Mu, are you still going to enter the White Cloud Ferry this time? The guardian elder asked. No, I want to enter the Pure Yuan Pavilion. Pure Yuan Pavilion? The guardian elder thought that he had misheard and repeated it. Yes. Chu Mu's tone was very certain. Although he did not understand, the guardian elder's duty was only to guard. Other things had nothing to do with him, and he would not interfere with others. Just in time, the Pure Yuan Pavilion has just been vacated. The guardian elder said and handed the sword token to Chu Mu. Chu Mu took the sword token and walked into the light gate. After the world spun, he found himself in a pavilion. This pavilion was very strange. There were no doors or windows, and it was completely sealed. Chu Mu did not know which floor he was on, or if it was only the first floor. What entered his eyes was a vast expanse of white, forming a flow of air that slowly flowed and filled the entire pavilion. Moreover, Chu Mu could clearly feel the aura fluctuations transmitted by these air flows. It was incomparably pure and rich. Amazing! Chu Mu sucked in a breath of cold air and was greatly shocked. He took a light breath and felt the pure and rich aura enter his nostrils and enter his body. He felt cool and his whole body was filled with strength. Let me try the effect, Chu Mu said to himself. He sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate the Shang Yuan sword chi technique. The Shang Yuan sword chi technique had a total of 7 levels. Now that Chu Mu had cultivated to the peak of the 7th level, the purity of the Shang Yuan sword chi had reached the limit and could not be broken through. Unless he changed to a higher quality sword chi technique, But that would have to wait until Chu Mu's cultivation broke through to the Qi transformation realm before he could change to the profound level sword Qi technique. Just as the upper origin sword aura was transported out of his dantian and circulated through his meridians, it immediately wrapped around Chu Mu's body tightly. Like moths to a flame, the pure and dense spirit aura entered Chu Mu's body through his pores and rapidly flowed towards his meridians. As the upper elemental sword Qi was being transported, countless pure spiritual energies surged forth and transformed into upper elemental sword Qi. His whole body was nourished by the pure and rich aura. It was as if he was soaking in a hot spring, and both his body and heart felt very comfortable. Chu Mu seemed to be lost in it and could not extricate himself. One cycle after another, the pure aura in the Pure Yuan Pavilion seemed to be endless. Chu Mu's whole body seemed to be immersed in a sea of aura. Very quickly, the 33 cycles were completed, but his meridians did not feel any burden. Cultivating in the Pure Yuan Pavilion was different from cultivating in the outside world. When cultivating in the outside world, one's own energy was squeezed out. This was the so-called refining energy into Qi. Therefore, swordsmen at the Sword Qi realm and half-step Qi transformation realm often needed to replenish their energy in a timely manner. Only then would they be more powerful in the future. If they did not replenish their energy, it would cause their cultivation speed to decrease. In serious cases, it would even affect their own foundation, causing them to be unable to progress in the future. As a result, the delicacies made in the Thousand Meals courtyard were not only delicious, they were also rich in nutrients and had an extremely strong energy replenishing effect. For example, the important disciples of the large sects and members of the royal family, they could take all kinds of nourishing spiritual medicines from a young age to build an extremely good foundation for their bodies. As a result, after cultivating, they could advance by leaps and bounds. However, cultivating in the Pure Yuan Pavilion did not consume their own energy. Instead, they absorbed pure aura from the outside world and transformed it into their own sword Qi. This method could only be done after breaking through to the Qi transformation realm and connecting with the world around them. When reaching this step, not only would the cultivation process not consume their own energy, it would instead nourish their body bit by bit, making them full of energy and their foundation solid. Their own life Yuan Qi would also become increasingly pure and surging. All these benefits far exceeded those of the Sword Qi realm and half-step Qi transformation realm. Time slowly passed. A storm of aura seemed to have swept up in the Pure Yuan Pavilion, with Chu Mu at the center of the storm. The whistling sound of the wind constantly rang out. Dense white pure aura rapidly flowed, forming a vortex with Chu Mu at the center. It constantly poured into his body through his pores and transformed into Upper Yuan Sword Qi. Unknowingly, when Chu Mu felt his meridians begin to overload, he seemed to awaken from his cultivation state. The vortex of aura immediately dissipated. "I wonder how long it's been?" Chu Mu opened his eyes and muttered to himself. After checking his body, his face was full of surprise. "My sword Qi cultivation has actually become so much stronger." In just a few hours of cultivation, Chu Mu discovered that his sword Qi cultivation had improved significantly. This effect was almost comparable to absorbing aura from low-grade spirit stones for a month. In other words, as long as Chu Mu entered the Pure Yuan Pavilion 2 or 3 more times and cultivated for a few hours each time, his sword Qi cultivation would reach the peak of half-step Qi transformation realm. No wonder it's one of the holy lands for cultivation. It's on par with the other holy lands for comprehending the concept. "This cultivation speed and effect is really amazing," Chu Mu exclaimed. Not only was his sword Qi more powerful, but its purity had not decreased at all. It could be used freely. After confirming the effects of the Pure Yuan Pavilion, Chu Mu planned to spend all his time comprehending the concept. As long as his metal concept reached 30%, He would enter the Pure Yuan Pavilion to raise his sword chi cultivation to the peak. At that time, he would be able to break through to the chi transformation realm. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 189. After the trip to the Pure Essence Pavilion, Chu Mu had used the sacred cultivation ground for less than an hour. Thus, Chu Mu stayed in the number 65 Sword Tower at ease and cultivated day after day. Sword chi arts, movement techniques, comprehending sword intent, and so on. There's still a month until the next small sword pagoda ranking battle, Chu Mu said inwardly after comprehending the concept of metal once again. Before entering the sacred cultivation ground, Chu Mu would never have believed that the comprehension of concepts could be so fast. But now, the speed of comprehending concepts in the Sword Tower was extremely fast. After a month, he didn't feel any progress in the concept of metal. 11% was his current level of comprehension of the concept of metal. It was extremely difficult to raise it to 12%. According to Chu Mu's estimation, it would take him at least 3 months or even more. But if he could enter the sacred cultivation ground, the speed would increase by 10 times, dozens of times, or even 100 times. Thus, the small sword pagoda ranking battle was extremely important to Chu Mu. Even a pig would be able to comprehend a concept if it entered a place like the Holy Land of Cultivation many times. For people with high comprehension, the increase was even more impressive. Especially for people like Chu Mu, whose comprehension had reached the level of a monstrous genius, the increase could reach 100 times. Time passed day after day. Chu Mu's sword chi cultivation was becoming more and more profound, but there was still a small gap between him and half-step chi transformation stage. The phantom step was stuck at 9 phantoms. It seemed like it was about to break through to 10 phantoms, but it was blocked. His dual sword arts had also reached a bottleneck. As long as he broke through, he would be able to reach the small success stage. At that time, the power of his dual swords would increase. On this day, Chu Mu was cultivating on the first floor of the Sword Tower. Suddenly, he felt the seal of the Sword Tower tremble. A series of noises came from it, which attracted Chu Mu's attention. He sheathed his sword and walked out of the Sword Tower. There were 2 people standing outside the seal. He didn't know one of them, and the other was Li Yingrui. With a slight frown, Chu Mu strode over. "What's the matter?" Standing in front of the seal, Chu Mu didn't walk out and asked coldly. This seal had a slight soundproofing effect. If the distance was too far, the sound would be weakened. However, now that they were only separated by a layer of seal, the other party would be able to hear them clearly even if they spoke in a normal tone. "I'm Han Ao," the man next to Li Yingrui said with his hands behind his back. His eyes were cold and his aquiline nose made him look even more arrogant. "Deacon of the Ao Sword Clan, the person in charge of the external house. I heard that you refused my invitation?" "So what?" Chu Mu didn't treat him politely since he didn't come with good intentions. "Nothing much. It's just that none of the people I want to invite have ever dared to reject me." Han Ao smiled coldly. "There's always a first time for everything," Chu Mu replied unhurriedly. "Very well. It seems that getting the 65th place has made you unable to distinguish reality from reality," Han Ao said coldly. Li Yingrui did not say a word and stood at the side expressionlessly. "Is there anything else?" "If there's nothing else, don't disturb my cultivation," Chu Mu said indifferently. "I like to convince people with reason. I'll give you a chance. In the small sword pagoda ranking battle in 5 days, we'll determine the winner based on the ranking. If you lose, you'll have to join the Ao Sword Clan and become a member." Han Ao smiled coldly and said, "On the other hand, if you win, not only will you not have to join the Ao Sword Clan, I'll also transfer you 50 cultivation time slots. Remember, I don't need your consent. Just do as I say." Since you want to give me time slots, I won't refuse, Chumu said. Very well. Haneo smiled coldly and turned to leave. Liangrui glanced at Chumu and also turned to leave. Soon, the news of the bet between Haneo and Chumu spread throughout the external house. This Chumu is really stupid. Yeah, I guess he thinks too highly of himself after getting 65th place in the small sword pagoda. Senior brother Han is ranked 29th on the steel sword ranking. Even if he doesn't improve, he can at least stay in the top 30. The gap between the top 30 and the 31st place is very obvious. No matter how strong this Chumu is, I think it's already very good if he can improve by a few places. He's still too inexperienced. Who doesn't know that Haneo is very arrogant and won't tolerate being rejected? If this Chumu obediently accepted Haneo's invitation, it would be fine. But now that he refused, he's looking for trouble for himself. I also want to join the Ao Sword Clan. Unfortunately, they didn't invite me. With your level, they might not want you even if you offer yourself to them. What are you talking about? I'm telling the truth. If you're not happy, then let's fight in the arena. Let's fight. I'm not afraid of you. Inside the 65th Sword Pagoda. Junior brother, it's really unwise this time. Luo Yufeng said worriedly. Senior brother, don't worry. When have I ever done something that I'm not confident in? Chumu said with a smile. That's true. Junior brother has never disappointed me. But Haneo is ranked 29th on the steel sword ranking. His strength is not to be underestimated. Compared to his previous opponents, he's much stronger. It's said that Xie Donghua couldn't even block a single strike from Haneo. Luo Yufeng still had a worried expression. After entering the Sword Mansion, he had suffered a great blow. When he was in the Azure Edge Sword Sect, he was a brilliant genius. In the Lizho Sword Academy, although he was not only brilliant, he was not a mediocre person. At least among the many people in the academy, he was above average. But after entering the Sword Mansion, he was reduced to a mediocre person. In terms of cultivation talent, comprehension, and other aspects, there were too many people who surpassed him. At least 3,000 people out of 4,000 were above him. Luo Yufeng deeply understood the strength of the students in the Sword Mansion, especially those on the steel sword ranking. The difference between Chumu's 65th and 29th place was too great. Especially the difference between the 30th place and the 30th place was very obvious. Senior brother, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Chumu said. In fact, in the previous round of the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge, Chumu did not use his full strength. At least, he had held back the introductory sword momentum and 40% of the wind essence subconsciously. All right. Luo Yufeng nodded. Next, the two chatted about other topics. Luo Yufeng also took the opportunity to ask Chumu about the difficulties in swordsmanship and so on. In the blink of an eye, 5 days had passed. A new round of the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle began again. This time, it was even more lively than the previous time. There was a sea of people, because many people had come for Chumu. As soon as this new student entered the outer mansion, he stirred up a storm and caused an uproar in the outer mansion. However, many people had not seen what Chumu looked like. There were more than 3,500 people participating in the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle. They were divided into 36 batches. He's Chumu? He doesn't look like much? Do you look very powerful? No matter what, he's too reckless. If he knows how to conceal his strength and bide his time, he will definitely be an expert in the future. What a joke. The spirit of a swordsman is to cut through all obstacles, to go against the current, to conceal one's strength and bide his time. Are you referring to those scholars? I think you should abandon the sword and switch to literature. A new round of debate began again. 100 names appeared on the steel sword ranking. One student entered the Small Sword Pagoda and the 100-threaded incense was lit again. This time, the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge was still hosted by the red-robed man. It's not too late to back out now. A voice sounded from the side. Chu-mu turned his head and saw Han Ao's arrogant face. Someone wants to give me the time to cultivate in the sacred land. How can I back out? Chu-mu said indifferently. Very well. I hope you can still be so arrogant when the time comes. Han Ao sneered. There seemed to be a collision between the two sides, causing the surrounding people to unconsciously retreat for fear of being affected. Xie Donghua stood not far away and stared at Chu-mu. There was a faint green glow in his eyes. He had been defeated by Chu-mu and had fallen from the steel sword ranking. He had to challenge again. Otherwise, he would only be able to use the sacred land for 8 hours every month. In addition to them, there were more people on the steel sword ranking who had come to participate in the Small Sword Pagoda Challenge. However, Han Ao was the only one in the top 30. The others were between the 31st and the 100th place. The time burned one by one and the challengers were ejected one after another. Luo Yufeng did not participate in this challenge. 100 credits per month. The second challenge required 100 credit. For a new student like Luo Yufeng, it was too much. Moreover, he knew very well that his overall strength had indeed improved a lot in these 3 months. However, he did not have the confidence to enter the top 300. Since that was the case, he might as well not waste the 100 credits and wait until his strength was stronger. There were many people who had the same idea as Luo Yufeng. There were at least 200 to 300 people here purely to watch the show. In the 8th batch, Xie Donghua entered the Small Sword Pagoda. This time, he lasted a full 45 incense sticks before being ejected. Compared to last time, this result is better. I should be able to rank in the 60s. Xie Donghua thought to himself. He finally breathed a sigh of relief. At least the 60s would not be too different from before. The difference in his heart would also not be too great. Those who were ranked in the 60s became nervous. This meant that one of them was likely to be challenged by Xie Donghua. If they were defeated, they would lose the right to live independently in the Sword Pagoda. One batch after another. In the 15th batch, Han Ao's name appeared on the steel sword ranking. Look, it's Senior Brother Han. I remember that Senior Brother Han has not participated in the Small Sword Pagoda ranking battle twice. I wonder if he will get a higher ranking this time. Definitely. Under everyone's gaze, Han Ao glanced at Chu-mu and walked toward the Small Sword Pagoda. Following the red-robed deacon's order, figures immediately shot into the Small Sword Pagoda. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 190. The time incense burned one by one. When it reached the 5th incense, the first person was ejected. After that, people continued to be ejected. When the time incense burned to the 38th incense, 99 people were ejected, leaving only one person to continue the challenge. Senior Han hasn't come out yet. Nonsense. With Senior Han's strength, he can at least last until the 60th incense. I remember that last time, Senior Han lasted until the 61st incense. Well, then this time, Senior Han can at least last until the 61st incense. Maybe even the 62nd incense. One had to know that in the challenges of the Small Sword Pagoda, the opponents would be stronger and more numerous as time passed. Naturally, the difficulty would increase. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to hold on to every incense. When the 60th incense burned, Han Ao was still not ejected. Xie Donghua and the others clenched their fists, their eyes flashing. Compared to Han Ao, who was in the top 30, they were still too far behind. Some people looked at Chu-mu, as if trying to see through Chu-mu's expression. However, Chu-mu's expression did not change. He was indifferent. When the 61st incense burned, Han Ao still did not appear. Everyone held their breaths because they felt that it was about time. Even if the 61st incense did not appear, the the 62nd incense was very likely to appear. When the 61st incense was about to burn out, a figure was ejected and landed on the ground. What a pity it's not the 62nd incense yet. Someone shook his head regretfully. Haneo frowned slightly and did not say a word. He glanced at Chu Mu and walked back to his original spot. Another 2 batches of students passed. Chu Mu's name appeared on the metal sword leaderboard. Look, it's Chu Mu. It's finally his turn. I wonder how many incense sticks he can last this time. It doesn't matter how long I last. In any case, my final ranking won't be able to compare to senior brother Han's. That's right. The bet between them was extremely unfair to begin with. Han Ao has been cultivating in the outer house for more than a year and has the resources of the Ao sword gang. Chu Mu is just a new student without any background. If Chu Mu is given some time, he might be able to catch up to Han Ao. While everyone was talking, Chu Mu and the rest of the 100 people shot into the small sword pagoda. It was the same milky white room as last time. A phantom slowly condensed. After 3 breaths of time, it appeared. Before it could even draw its sword, it was immediately killed by Chu Mu's sword. Blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the walls behind it red. The enemies that appeared before him were not very strong in terms of sword chi cultivation or swordsmanship. Moreover, they had not comprehended the swordsmanship. As a result, Chu Mu often killed them all with a single strike. Chu Mu once again displayed his high speed of slaughter. If someone saw it with their own eyes, they would absolutely be extremely shocked. This sort of speed of slaughter was unparalleled. In a flash, 30 incense sticks burned, and more than half of the people were already shot out of the small sword pagoda. This time, Lian Qingyun and Huangfu Changtian entered the small sword pagoda together. When the 36th incense stick was just about to burn, Lian Qingyun and Huangfu Changtian were shot out of the small sword pagoda at practically the same time. Chu Mu hasn't come out yet. Lian Qingyun turned around to glance at the small sword pagoda and said. He persisted until the 39th incense stick last time. He might be able to persist until the 40th incense stick this time, Huangfu Changtian said indifferently. At the 39th incense stick, the enemies Chu Mu faced had become extremely formidable. Sword Chi cultivation at the peak of the half-step Sword Chi, a formidable high-level sword technique that was close to perfection, attainments in swordsmanship at the master level, and the support of 20% concept. Moreover, it wasn't 1 or 2 such formidable enemies, but 6 of them. But Chu Mu's strength had obviously improved greatly when compared to the last time. Under the cloud-shattering sword explosion that contained 30% concept of cloud, the 6 formidable enemies were directly pierced through by countless sword chi, causing them to be riddled with holes and perish. The milky white color had already become blood red long ago, transforming into a blood-colored purgatory, and the viscous blood that dripped down caused one to be horrified. Even more formidable enemies appeared, and more than half of the sword chi within Chu Mu's dantian was consumed, but he didn't suffer any harm. Kill! The golden edge tore through the sky and killed formidable enemies once again. Chu Mu displayed his sword technique to the extreme. Every sword strike was like the wind and clouds, yet contained the sharpness of metal, causing its might to be exceedingly formidable. He ceaselessly utilized the illusory steps and windwalk movement technique, advancing and retreating with ease. Another 10 formidable enemies were killed. Last time, Chu Mu was killed here. The formidable enemies that appeared once again were different. They actually knew how to use movement techniques, making it even harder for Chu Mu to deal with them. Swish, 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 swish. Many figures surrounded Chu Mu. These formidable enemies were no longer as reckless as before. Instead, they knew how to work together, move around, and attack together. As a result, the pressure on Chu Mu multiplied. However, in terms of movement techniques, Chu Mu's attainments were far above them. The fake clear breeze sword swept up a cool breeze, enveloping the surroundings. Swish, swish. Formidable enemies were killed by Chu Mu one after another. Another formidable enemy appeared. Chu Mu was surprised to discover that one of the formidable enemies used the same movement technique as him, the illusory step. However, this formidable enemy's illusory steps was only at the small success stage. After being killed by Chu Mu, the next enemy that appeared used the illusory steps to reach 5 phantoms. Following that, death followed one after another. This was a formidable enemy with 9 phantoms. 10 formidable enemies besieged Chu Mu. Chu Mu displayed his full strength. His sword arts burst forth, and his figure changed. 9 phantoms appeared, exchanging blows with the enemy. The small sword pagoda was very mystical. Even if these formidable enemies appeared in the virtual world, their bodies and swords seemed to be real. Only when they dissipated when they were killed did people know that they were fake. With the price of 2 sword strikes, Chu Mu killed these 10 formidable enemies. 10 formidable enemies seemed to be the limit of the number of formidable enemies that appeared at the same time. That's all. Chu Mu looked at the blood-red purgatory of the room and frowned slightly. At this time, another figure condensed. It was so fast that Chu Mu didn't have time to react. It had already finished condensing and a sword came slashing over. Chu Mu counterattacked with his sword. At the same time, he stabbed forward and pierced through the enemy. However, he discovered that it was only a phantom. The real formidable enemy appeared behind him. His sharp killing intent locked onto Chu Mu. His expression didn't change. Chu Mu used the illusory steps, and the phantom was pierced through by the enemy's sword. It was clear that this formidable enemy was proficient in the illusory steps, and seemed to be even stronger than Chu Mu. What was even stranger was that there was only one formidable enemy. Chu Mu continuously used the illusory steps, and the enemy also continuously used the illusory step. Both sides' phantoms overlapped and collided. Once they were defeated, new phantoms would immediately appear. 9 phantoms flashed by. Chu Mu discovered that although this formidable enemy was also at the level of 9 phantoms, his application was clearly superior. Whether it was the speed of condensing phantoms after being defeated, or other aspects, Chu Mu was inferior to the enemy. Raising his mind to 120%, Chu Mu forgot about everything else and focused on fighting this formidable enemy who was proficient in the illusory step. At this moment, Chu Mu was like a sponge, constantly absorbing the essence of the enemy's illusory step. This was precisely what he was lacking. Chu Mu had a feeling that if he could absorb the essence of this formidable enemy's illusory steps, then his illusory steps would rise to Deshang's level. As the two sides clashed, Chu Mu was too focused on absorbing the enemy's essence and couldn't dodge in time. He was stabbed by the sword, and the 3rd wound was dripping with blood. So that's how it is. I understand now. Chu Mu suddenly realized. This formidable enemy's illusory steps was superior to Chu Mu's in the fact that it alternated between real and fake. The 9 phantoms he used all looked fake, but in the next breath, there was a high chance that one of them would become real. Because the real body would merge with the phantoms, it was impossible to guard against. It was one thing to comprehend it, but it was another to put it into practice. If it was anyone else, they would need at least several months to master it. However, Chu Mu's perception was extremely monstrous. After trying a dozen times, he finally found the feeling. In an instant, he had a strange feeling, as if he had broken through some kind of shackle. Taking a step forward, phantoms appeared and the 10 phantoms changed. Illusory steps. Perfection. Once it reached perfection, Chu Mu immediately felt that he could change between the real and fake phantoms as he pleased. The 10 phantoms surrounded the enemy. His attainment in the illusory steps was above the enemy's, and coupled with his strong perception, Chu Mu immediately discovered the enemy's real body and stabbed him. The enemy's reaction was also very fast. He hurriedly changed between real and fake, but he was still seen through by Chu Mu. In 3 strikes, Chu Mu beheaded him. Before Chu Mu could let out a sigh of relief, 10 more enemies rushed towards him. They all slashed out sword chi at Chu Mu, as if they wanted to tear him apart. Using the illusory steps to perfection, the 9 phantoms instantly shattered. Chu Mu broke out of the encirclement and killed the enemy. He secretly rejoiced. If the illusory steps had not reached perfection, then he would most likely have been killed by that attack. The 3 wounds caused Chu Mu to lose a lot of blood. Although they were fake, Chu Mu started to feel a little weak. It seems like I can't hold on for too long. I have to kill more in a short period of time. Only then can I get a higher ranking. Chu Mu said to himself. Using 40% of the concept of wind, he used Great Wind Moves the Forest to kill the enemy. Just as this group of enemies was defeated, the next group of 10 people immediately rushed forward, brazenly attacking Chu Mu without fear of death. Sword Aura. In an instant, the killing moves of the 10 enemies collapsed. Their bodies seemed to be frozen, and Chu Mu seized the opportunity to kill them. Shattering Cloud Sword Explosion. Countless clouds of sword chi shot out, and the 10 enemies that had just appeared were pierced through by the shattering cloud sword explosion before they could even attack. Seizing the opportunity, Chu Mu attacked with all his strength. However, after using the killing moves, the sword chi was consumed very quickly. Not long after, the sword chi in Chu Mu's dantian was completely used up. He could only use the illusory steps again to kill a few more enemies. However, after that, he was hit by the killing moves of the remaining enemies. His protective sword chi shattered, and he directly died. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 191. With a whoosh, Chu Mu was ejected from the small sword pagoda. The time incense had just burned to the 50th segment. Everyone stared at the time incense, dumbfounded. They were too shocked to say a word. Last time, it was only 39 segments. This time, it was 50 segments. Such a huge improvement seemed to have never happened in the past 10 years. His ranking will advance by at least 10 or even 20 places. Someone finally reacted and exclaimed while sucking in a breath of cold air. That's too scary. Xie Donghua and the others were also shocked, and their expressions changed greatly. Even Han Ao was unable to maintain his calm. He remembered very clearly that although he had made some progress during his first and second challenges, he had only lasted for 2 more incense sticks of time. Even Huangfu Shenglong, who was ranked first, had only improved by 4 segments of incense. Han Ao thought about it carefully. Among all the people he knew, including those from a few years ago or more than a decade ago, there had never been anyone who could last more than 5 incense sticks longer in the second challenge of the small sword pagoda, let alone 11 incense stick. What a scary guy. Fortunately, I raised the bet early. Otherwise, he would definitely surpass me in the future. Although Han Ao thought highly of himself, he was not a fool. He had to admit that one day, he would be surpassed by Chu Mu. However, it's only 50 segments of incense. I estimate that he will only be ranked in the 40s. He still can't compare with me. As long as he becomes a member of the Ao Sword Gang, he will be a member of the Ao Sword Gang. Even if he dies, he will be a ghost of the Ao Sword Gang. Han Ao thought to himself. Luo Yufeng was shocked and sad at the same time. 50 segments of incense. Compared to Han Ao's 61, there was a difference of 11 segments. Chu Mu's ranking could not be higher than Han Ao's. Although I'm extremely shocked, Chu Mu will lose for sure. Many old students said one after another. It's hard to say. Last time, Chu Mu only lasted 39 segments of incense, but in the end, he was ranked 65th. Maybe this time will be as special as last time. Xie Donghua and the others also shook their heads in agreement. Special situations rarely occurred. Chu Mu's face was calm. He walked back to his original position without saying a word. Most of his mind was immersed in the memory of the perfect phantom step. Batch after batch entered the small sword pagoda. Finally, the last student of the last batch was ejected. Everyone's gaze became fervent. They held their breaths and stared at the iron sword leaderboard. Countless names rapidly changed on the leaderboard. In the end, under thousands of people's gazes, 100 names were fixed, from 201st to 300. Sun Chongfeng, Nangong Haoyang, Gao Guling, and the others' names. Compared to last time, they had improved by 2 ranks. It was not very obvious, but it was enough to motivate them. However, it was compared to Chu Mu's name. 200 names, Chu Guling, ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. 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 Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Lian Qingyun and Huang Fu Changtian's rankings had advanced by 2 places as well. The 2 of them were still arranged at the front and back, but this time, it was Huang Fu Changtian who was in front of Lian Qingyun, and the 2 of them seemed to be at odds. Sigh, I actually didn't improve, me too. Some of the older students looked at their rankings and sighed with a dejected look on their faces. I'm even worse. I actually fell back 1 rank. Don't talk. The names on the iron sword leaderboard flickered and changed again. Everyone knew that the main event was coming. Immediately, no matter if they were happy for their own improvement, dejected, or annoyed, all of them raised their spirits. They removed all distracting thoughts and held their breath. They stared at the iron sword leaderboard with sparkling eyes. 3 breaths seemed to be as long as 3 years. In the end, it was fixed at 100 names. Xie Donghua took a look and saw that his name was ranked 64th. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and revealed a smile. Han Ao immediately found his name in the top 30. He was ranked 27. Compared to before, rising 1 rank was not an easy matter. Where's Chu Mu? That's right. Where is his name? Many students searched for Chu Mu's name on the Iron Sword leaderboard, but they could not find it. Could it be that he didn't make the leaderboard? Are you stupid? If he can't make the leaderboard after persisting for 50 incense sticks, then who can? That's strange. Why can't I see it? Could it be that he suddenly advanced into the top 30? Everyone was shocked and hastily moved their gazes up into the silver name region. They looked at each name carefully, but still did not see Chu Mu's name. It can't be. Could it be that he, immediately, a nearly impossible guess welled up in their minds. Impossible? Han Ao's face changed and he secretly comforted himself. Everyone's gazes continued to move up into the golden name region. Chu Mu DD 5th, each of them had difficulty breathing as if they were drowning. Even their words were intermittent, as if they were about to die. Hit me and see if I'm dreaming. A slap sounded and that person's face swelled up. However, he ignored it and stared blankly at the name on the Iron Sword leaderboard. He did not say anything as if he had lost his soul. Inconceivable. I can't believe it. It's unexpectedly 5th. Have I not woken up yet? After a short moment of silence, the place exploded and became lively. Everyone began to discuss loudly. Junior brother. I'm not dreaming, right? Luo Yufeng said with difficulty. Yes, it's real. Chu Mu nodded. If there was one person who could maintain his calm, it would be him. Although he was shocked by his own ranking, Chu Mu also felt that it was natural. I have to report this to the palace master. I wonder how the palace master will react. The red-robed attendant was expressionless as he stared at Chu Mu and thought to himself. 50 hours. Chu Mu said to Han Ao beside him. Han Ao's face immediately turned ugly, as if he had eaten shit. However, words that had been said were like water that could not be spilled. There was no way to take it back. Especially for someone as arrogant and self-important as Han Ao, there was no way he would go back on his word. I'll pass it to you. Han Ao's face gradually returned to normal. He stared deeply at Chu Mu and said, "But I still hope that you can join our sect. With your talent, you will definitely be valued by our sect. When the time comes, you will enjoy various resources to speed up your cultivation. Thank you for your kindness. There's no need to mention this again." Han Ao's attitude was out of Chu Mu's expectations. He thought that even if Han Ao did not go back on his word, he would at least say a few harsh words. It seemed that those who could leave their names on the steel sword ranking were all outstanding talent. Han Ao shook his head and stopped talking. However, he was still thinking. Just as he had said, his invitation had never been rejected. This time would not be an exception. He had to find a way to make Chu Mu join the Proud Sword sect. Han Ao had an intuition that with Chu Mu, the Proud Sword sect would definitely become stronger in the future. They might even have the chance to compete with the 3 alliances and become the 4th alliance. The small sword pagoda ranking battle ended once again. The news that Chu Mu had won 5th place swept through the entire outer mansion like a storm, causing a huge uproar in the outer mansion. After leaving the small sword pagoda, the Red Deacon quickly went to the sword tower where the outer mansion master resided to report the news. Oh, from 65th place to 5th place, a total of 60 places. The outer mansion master was also greatly surprised and shocked. It seems that he had not fully adapted to the challenge of the small sword pagoda and held back some of his strength. However, in the past 100 years, he is the first person to have such speed of improvement. People like him are all monsters with unstoppable sharpness. Lord Mansion Master, do you want to summon him? The Red Deacon asked. No. The Mansion Master shook his head. I will summon him when he breaks through to the Qi transformation realm. Yes. The Red Deacon nodded and retreated. Junior brother. Luo Yufeng's face was still filled with excitement. His heart was still immersed in the shock of confirming that Chu Mu had really won 5th place. Chu Mu smiled slightly and did not say anything. Junior brother, I will go back first. Luo Yufeng thought for a moment and said. The two parted ways, and Chu Mu returned to the 65th Sword Pagoda. He thought for a moment about whether he should go to the Hall of 100 Affairs and apply for a challenge to the owner of the 5th Sword Pagoda, Huang Fu Kuang. In fact, the 100 independent Sword Pagoda were almost identical. Therefore, even if he defeated Huang Fu Kuang and moved into the 5th Sword Pagoda, there would be nothing special. At most, it would sound a little more advanced. Tomorrow, I will go to the Hall of 100 Affairs and apply for a challenge to Huang Fu Kuang. Chu Mu finally made a decision. It was not for the right to live in the 5th Sword Pagoda, but out of his heart. He wanted to fight with a strong opponent and improve himself through actual combat. In the 5th Sword Pagoda, Huang Fu Kuang, who was practicing his swordsmanship, suddenly grinned when he heard the results of the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Chu Mu, a new student. How interesting. After being bored for half a year, there is finally someone worthy of me making a move. I hope he won't disappoint me. Huang Fu Kuang muttered to himself. He sheathed his sword and carried it on his back. He strode out of the sword pagoda and out of the seal. At the same time, the people in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th Sword Pagoda were all alarmed by this news. This was because it had been a long time since anyone had been able to enter the top 10. This time, there was a new student who had entered the top 10 in the 2nd challenge of the Small Sword Pagoda. Moreover, he was 5th. How could they not be shocked? Suddenly, people who usually did not show up were a little restless. Not long from now, there would be a day where the winds and clouds would surge and the eyes of the masses would be fixed on them. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 192. Chu Mu, tomorrow afternoon, you will battle with Huang Fu Kuang on the battle arena, said the deacon of the Hall of 100 Things concisely. He then smiled and said, You've done something that no one else could do. It's amazing. I wonder what level you'll reach in the future. I'll have to trouble you. Chu Mu laughed and nodded his head. Huang Fu Kuang is a member of the royal family. He has an arrogant temperament. When he first entered the Sword Mansion, he went around challenging people. However, later on, his strength rose to an extremely high level, and there were too few people who could fight him. Half a year ago, his sword chi cultivation had reached the peak of the half-step chi transformation stage, and the conception he had comprehended was rather special. It was called the conception of power, and it was said that he had already comprehended 29% of it. The fake sword he uses is a heavy sword that weighs 100 kilograms. His mountain-cutting sword art has been practiced to perfection. His strength is astonishing. You have to be careful. It's best not to fight him head-on, said the deacon of the Hall of Hundred Affairs. Thank you, deacon. Chu Mu saluted with his sword. I hope you can win again, the deacon said as he returned the sword salute and then took his leave. Huang Fu Kuang, I didn't expect you to be even more anxious than me, Chu Mu muttered to himself, revealing a faint smile. He was somewhat looking forward to the final battle the day after tomorrow. The news of Huang Fu Kuang taking the initiative to issue a challenge quickly spread, and everyone in the outer palace knew about it. All of them said that there was going to be a good show to watch. Huang Fu Kuang was extremely powerful and had been famous for a long time. As a super dark horse of the younger generation, Chu Mu was stunning. The final battle between the two would definitely be a clash of the strongest. Many people were looking forward to it. They couldn't wait for the final battle to begin. Time flowed like water, and in the blink of an eye, the day of the final battle arrived. The battle arena outside the Hall of Hundred Affairs was completely surrounded by people. It was crowded inside and outside. It was unusually lively. Other than the ordinary new and old students, even the top 100 people on the Iron Sword list had arrived one after another. Look, that's Li Chongxing, ranked 10th. A cry of surprise rang out. Everyone turned their heads to look. I also want the 8th ranked Duan Qinghai. I see her. She's number 6, Lu Mei. 4th place, Huang Fu Fian. It's too exciting. Even without the battle between Chu Mu and Huang Fu Kuang, I feel satisfied just by watching them. Are you stupid? If it weren't for the battle between Chu Mu and Huang Fu Kuang, they wouldn't have appeared. That's the 3rd-ranked Ouyang Qingye, the 2nd-ranked Qin Shi, and the 1st-ranked Huang Fu Shenglong. I didn't expect that the 3 of them would also appear. Amidst the lively discussions, Chu Mu and Huang Fu Kuang arrived here. However, the first battle was not between the 2 of them, but between Xie Donghua and Bu Chun. Their sword techniques collided and their concepts intersected. It was abnormally intense, and it was too much for the spectators to take in. In the end, Xie Donghua narrowly defeated Bu Chun and obtained the right to reside in the 64th Sword Tower. Bu Chun, on the other hand, had to either pay a certain price to challenge Xie Donghua next month or participate in the ranking battle of the Small Sword Pagoda 3 months later. The second battle was between Han Ao and Wan Song. In the end, Han Ao was defeated by Wan Song and could only continue to reside in the 28th Sword Tower. As for the duration of the cultivation Holy Land, Han Ao and Wan Song were the same. Huang Fu Kuang, Chu Mu, come up to the stage, the deacon of the Hundred Affairs Hall announced loudly. Immediately, the spectators' hearts were burning with excitement. Ha 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 ha! A wild laugh shook the 9 heavens. Immediately after, a figure soared into the sky. His aura was biting cold, and his aura was dense and overbearing. He shot straight into the sky above the battle arena and landed straight down. His every movement was filled with power. When he landed, a loud sound was heard, and the entire battle arena seemed to tremble slightly. Chu Mu, come up. Huang Fu Kuang waved his sword in its scabbard, stirring up the wind and clouds. The air whistled as he pointed at the crowd. His aura condensed and pressed forward, almost suffocating everyone. The penetrating power of his voice was extremely strong, like the clanging of metal, causing people's bodies to unconsciously tremble. Among the crowd, a figure soared into the sky, and with a turn in the air, he landed lightly on the battle arena like a gust of wind. Your movement technique is not bad, but I wonder how your swordsmanship is? Huang Fu Kuang laughed loudly. He pointed his heavy sword at Chu Mu, and the momentum of flying sand and stones rushed towards him. You will know soon, Chu Mu replied indifferently. His aura was condensed, and he was not affected in the slightest. Huang Fu Kuang was as his name suggested. He was tall and strong, and was half a head taller than Chu Mu. His rough face made him look extremely heroic and masculine. His eyes contained a kind of arrogance that came from the bottom of his heart. It was innate and not cultivated. This kind of arrogance had long been integrated into his bones, forming his own unique temperament. Huang Fu Kuang's arrogance was based on his own strength and foundation. It was a kind of true temperament and not an act. Ordinary swordsmen would have been weakened by Huang Fu Kuang's aura. Once they attacked, their aura would be even weaker, and they would not be his opponent at all. However, Chu Mu appeared to be at ease. He allowed Huang Fu Kuang's aura to attack him, and completely dissolved it, which attracted Huang Fu Kuang's attention. You have some ability. Qin Shi nodded. She was a beauty, but she did not have the slightest sense of weakness. Instead, she had a bit of a manly spirit, and was filled with a strange attraction. If you don't have the ability, how can you get 5th place? Ouyang Qingye said indifferently with his hands behind his back. Huang Fu Shenglong was a man of few words, but when he stood there without making any movements, he would not be ignored by others. That was because there was a kind of endless aura coming from him. If he can defeat that big guy, then it's worth it for me to make a move. Huang Fu Fian giggled. She had a petite body and a lively personality, giving others the feeling that she was a child. However, if anyone treated her as a child, they would definitely regret it. A new student getting 5th place by luck is already the best he can do, but he still wants to defeat Huang Fu Kuang. Duan Qinghai sneered. Yes, Huang Fu Kuang has been in 5th place for 9 months. Although he did not participate in the small sword pagoda ranking battle, his strength must have increased a lot compared to 9 months ago. Li Changxing nodded and slowly said, this new student called Chu Mu was able to get 5th place. His strength is at most equivalent to Huang Fu Kuang from 9 months ago. He is not a match for the current Huang Fu Kuang. You have attracted my attention, so I will not be lenient. Huang Fu Kuang grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. His eyes shone brightly, and his aura became even more domineering. Draw your sword, Chu Mu said indifferently as he slowly pulled out the fake clear wind sword. Okay. Huang Fu Kuang roared as he pulled out his sword. The moment the heavy sword was pulled out, the ear-piercing sound of friction caused goosebumps to rise all over people's body. Huang Fu Kuang's sword was 1.3 meters long, the hilt was 30 centimeters, and the blade was 1 meter long. It was longer than an ordinary sword, and the blade was as wide as a palm and as thick as 2 fingers. At first glance, it gave people an oppressive feeling of sharpness and power. The heavy sword was unsheathed and slashed forward. The terrifying sound of air exploding could be heard, causing people's scalps to go numb. The air seemed to be split apart, and the compressed air rushed towards Chu Mu, making puffing sounds. This kind of pressure was enough to turn an ordinary strong man into minced meat on the spot. Chu Mu's sword pierced out, and a green light flashed in everyone's eyes. Then, with a puffing sound, Huang Fu Kuang's pressure was dispersed, turning into a cool breeze. Huang Fu Kuang roared like a fierce beast. He held his sword with both hands and took a step forward. A terrifying aura immediately rushed out. His eyes emitted a sharp light as he waved his sword. The pitch-black heavy sword brazenly pierced out, and a whistling sound rang out. The pitch-black sword penetrated the air, and the air was suddenly pushed by a terrifying force, crushing towards Chu Mu like a mountain. Break! Chu Mu unsheathed his sword. There were no hands, only a few flashes of sword light. Almost at the same time, the mountain-like air collapsed once again. With a casual slash of his sword, a cool breeze blew out, containing a sharp coldness, causing everyone's eyes to light up. Break! Huang Fu Kuang exhaled and roared. His aura was astonishing. The pitch-black heavy sword crushed the cool breeze, bringing along layers of sword shadows. It was like a black mountain descending, blasting towards Chu Mu. Strength, pure strength. Even the fluctuating sword chi was filled with the feeling of extreme yang energy, as if it wanted to use pure strength to bombard, suppress, and crush everything. In an instant, Chu Mu felt an immense pressure. This kind of strength was heavy, and it made it difficult for him to breathe. Unavoidably, the two swords collided, and a sonorous sound rang out, causing people to lose their hearing. Dazzling sparks flew out, and a terrifying pressure surged over, causing Chu Mu's expression to change slightly. The pseudo-clear wind sword instantly bent and fiercely bounced back. Chu Mu borrowed the force of the collision to retreat. His hand loosened slightly, and the pseudo-clear wind sword rotated in his palm. Using this unique technique, Chu Mu dispersed the surging power. He once again grasped the pseudo-clear wind sword tightly. His attention towards Huang Fu Kuang had risen to the peak. Huang Fu Kuang's 2 feet repeatedly stomped on the ground, causing the sword fighting stage to tremble and let out rumbling noises. A pure and terrifying boundless energy charged towards Chu Mu as if it wanted to crush a mountain. Using both hands, the pitch-black heavy sword pierced forward. The terrifying power pierced through the tip of the sword, and countless ripples appeared in the air. This kind of sword was something that even an ordinary Qi transformation realm sword artist would not dare to face. It was not a killing move, but its power was already close to a high-level killing move. Under the combination of strength and speed, it was incomparably shocking. Chu Mu's sword lightly tapped on the pitch-black heavy sword. Without waiting for its power to explode, his body floated in an arc, and he quickly moved to the side, dodging Huang Fu Kuang's powerful attack. The pitch-black heavy sword missed and bombarded the air. Instantly, the air was shattered into countless pieces, and one could faintly see a thin cyclone shooting forward, shooting out of the arena. An old student's expression greatly changed, and he hurriedly activated his sword chi armor. With a bang, the sword chi armor shattered, and he retreated 2 steps, his face pale with fear. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qi.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 193. Ha 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 ha. Take my sword again. Huang Fu Kuang's sword missed, and he suddenly twisted his body while laughing wildly. He held his sword with both hands and slashed horizontally. A terrifying sword aura burst forth as if he wanted to cut a mountain in half. Chu Mu's figure had just landed on the ground when it split into a phantom. The phantom was shattered, but Chu Mu appeared beside Huang Fu Kuang. His sword was like a breeze. Blocking with a sword, Huang Fu Kuang didn't retreat. Instead, he pressed forward and lifted his heavy sword upwards. Chu Mu's sword light changed and the vibrating force slightly knocked the heavy sword aside. His sword stabbed straight towards Huang Fu Kuang's face. Huang Fu Kuang's left hand released the hilt of his sword and flicked his finger towards Chu Mu's sword. Unexpectedly, his eyes flashed and his finger missed. The cold and sharp light was still locked on, and a cold star was reflected in his pupils. Huang Fu Kuang's eyes trembled and his expression changed slightly. He stomped heavily on the ground and flew back like a cannonball. He once again held his sword with both hands and slashed out sword aura that could split mountains and stones, crisscrossing and slashing towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu shattered the first sword aura with a single slash, and then used the momentum to use Wandering in the Wind to shuttle through the sword aura. The fake clear wind sword fiercely attacked. Pay attention, I'm going to use my full strength. Huang Fu Kuang shouted openly. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation rose from his body. Chu Mu knew that it was the fluctuation of a concept, but it was different from the various concepts that he had grasped or even felt. It was a very pure concept fluctuation, giving people a feeling of a thick and explosive power. There was nothing else but power. Moreover, the level of this concept fluctuation was not low. Just as the deacon of the 100 Affairs Hall said, his concept had reached 29%. In the outer house, there were 12 cultivation holy lands, but none of them could accelerate the comprehension of the concept of power. From this point, Huang Fu Kuang was already behind others. However, he had already comprehended 29% of his power. This level of comprehension was astonishing. Chu He and Su Jianfeng were nothing compared to him. If it weren't for the gap between 30% and 40%, many people wouldn't be able to cross it at all. Even those with strong comprehension abilities would have to spend a long time before they could cross it. It was precisely because of this that Huang Fu Kuang had chosen to remain at the peak of half-step Qi transformation realm. He was 80% confident that once he broke through to the Qi transformation realm, his strength would definitely increase to 40%. At this moment, Huang Fu Kuang unreservedly displayed 29% of his power. Terrifying energy waves gushed out like lava from a volcano, ferocious and unparalleled. The people around the sword battle arena had no choice but to retreat because their expressions changed drastically. They felt extremely uncomfortable and oppressed, and even breathing became incomparably difficult. What a terrifying concept! Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness as he muttered to himself. The concept of power was different from the concept of wind. It was a kind of special concept, and special concepts often had their own uniqueness. They were even more powerful than normal concepts. In other words, a 29% concept of power was comparable to a 30% concept of wind. Ranked 5th with such strength, just how strong are the top 4? Chu Mu still had the leisure to ponder this question. Stone Splitter. With an explosive shout, Huang Fu Kuang, who was under the influence of his concept of strength, was like a human-shaped Tyrannosaurus Rex. He slashed out with his heavy sword, and a terrifying sword Qi condensed and gushed out. The sword slashed out, and a trench actually appeared on the sword battle stage. The speed wasn't fast, but the power was extremely strong. Even Huang Fu Shenglong and the others had a trace of seriousness in their eyes. Big Guy's strength is even stronger, Huang Fu Fian said with a smile, shaking her head. What a powerful sword skill! Chu Mu was inwardly shocked, but he didn't fight back. He clearly knew that strength wasn't his forte. Using something he wasn't good at against something his opponent was good at was a stupid thing to do. He used his phantom body art, and 3 phantoms appeared, staggered left and right. The 3 phantoms were instantly destroyed by the stone splitter, and Chu Mu appeared in front of Huang Fu Kuang like a breeze. Wind shaking the forest. Huang Fu Kuang was shocked, and he hurriedly waved his sword. The pitch-black heavy sword's momentum was huge, and it shattered the incoming wind. Ground splitter. With another shout, Huang Fu Kuang borrowed the force of the collision with the wind shaking the forest to soar into the sky. Sword Qi surged, and his power was violent. His sword landed on the ground like a meteor. Chu Mu's scalp went numb, and he hurriedly used his wind-sweeping shadow to dodge. With a bang, dust flew everywhere and rocks flew everywhere. The sword battle arena, which had already been torn apart, had another hole. Huang Fu Kuang's sword was stuck in the hole, and there were still countless sword Qi shooting out. Chu Mu's figure swayed, and he avoided the incoming rocks and sword Qi. Golden edge splitting sky. Huang Fu Kuang's hair stood on end. He pulled out his heavy sword and placed it in front of him, and his sword Qi turned into an armor. A clanging sound exploded, and a golden light flashed past. Huang Fu Kuang only felt his hands tremble, and a terrifying sharpness penetrated through. The sword Qi armor was shattered in an instant. His reaction was extremely fast, and the moment the sword Qi armor shattered, he soared into the sky, avoiding the follow-up attack. Mountain-breaking slash. Huang Fuquang's heavy sword was raised high above his head, and sword qi gathered around his body. He didn't hold back at all. This sword was Huang Fuquang's strongest sword. Before the killing move landed, the terrifying aura had already condensed the surrounding air, and people had no choice but to retreat again to maintain their breathing. Huang Fu Shenglong and the others' expressions changed slightly. This kind of sword already made them feel a great threat. On the sword battle arena, Chu Mu only felt the air being compressed, as if there was a mountain above him pressing down, wanting to squash him into a meat patty. Then, a sword light that seemed to come from outer space, dazzling and filled with a sense of destruction, split the mountain in half and heavily smashed it to the ground. A cool breeze blew past Chu Mu's eyes, and sword qi surged, causing his clothes to flutter. He swung his sword upwards, without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. In the next breath, a gentle breeze blew, the wind rippled, the wind howled, and the wind roared. Simplified form of wind. It's that sword. Lien Qingyun and the others were stunned. The moon-breaking slash and the simplified form of wind collided, and violent explosions sounded out continuously. A cold killing intent spiraled in the wind, and it drew an arc in the air, shooting towards Huang Fuquang. Huang Fuquang's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly raised his sword to block in front of him, barely blocking the killing intent. With a bang, the killing intent shattered, and the huge impact caused Huang Fuquang to fly out uncontrollably. Below him was the sword battle arena, and once he fell out of the arena, it would be his loss. Turning around in midair, Huang Fuquang slashed out with his heavy sword, and the sword qi hit the ground, creating a recoil. Huang Fuquang's body paused for a moment, and his palm was wrapped in sword qi, slapping the ground that was shot out, and he flew back to the sword battle arena. Just as he landed on the stage, he saw a figure approaching from the corner of his eyes, and he subconsciously slashed out with his sword. Chu Mu dodged Huang Fuquang's sword, and brought out layers of afterimages. There were 9 of them surrounding Huang Fuquang, and it was hard for Huang Fuquang to distinguish between real and fake. I don't care if you're real or fake, I'll break you with one sword. Huang Fuquang didn't care anymore. The muscles on his hands bulged, and a terrifying power burst out. Under the intent realm, his strength doubled, and his heavy sword swept out in all directions, looking like a mighty army sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. It wasn't a sword technique, but pure strength. Chu Mu was excited to see this, and the sword light turned gentle. The sword stabbed out, light and slow, allowing people to clearly see the trajectory. It seemed soft and powerless, but when it came into contact, Huang Fuquang found that his powerful sword seemed to have fallen into a quagmire, and it became extremely difficult. His expression changed, and he exhaled. He used even more strength, but he still couldn't turn the situation around. Huang Fuquang couldn't help but think back to the time when he practiced his sword technique in the pool. Now, he felt that it was even more difficult than when he practiced in the pool, and it greatly restricted the power of his sword technique, making it difficult for him to fully display it. Using softness to overcome strength. As a sword grandmaster, Chu Mu only practiced one basic sword technique on Earth. However, the basic sword technique had been summarized and modified by generations of sword masters, and it was all-encompassing. After Chu Mu reached the level of a sword grandmaster, he gradually realized that the basic sword technique he practiced seemed to be the same as the basic sword technique on the ancient sword continent, but the essence it contained was much deeper. He had just opened a new door and stepped into a new world of sword techniques. The rhythm began to be controlled by Chu Mu, and Huang Fuquang's sword became slow and powerless. He couldn't help but feel depressed. The 2 sword techniques and 1 killing move that he refined couldn't do anything to Chu Mu, and his 29% intent realm couldn't suppress him either. Even in the final clash of sword techniques, he was at a disadvantage. This kind of weak and powerless feeling when he swung his sword with all his strength was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. There was a kind of difficulty that came from the depths of his body, and it made Huang Fuquang almost vomit blood. After a few sword strikes, the feeling of difficulty became deeper, and it made him dumbfounded. "Stop fighting, stop fighting. You win this time," Huang Fuquang shouted. He withdrew his sword and quickly retreated with a depressed look on his face. This kind of fighting isn't satisfying enough. He comprehended the intent realm of strength, and he mainly focused on strength. What he liked the most was a head-on clash of strength. Obviously, Chumu didn't focus on strength. He won just like that? The spectators were all stunned. They felt that this kind of ending was a little strange, and they wanted to continue. What they wanted to see was a complete victor between the two of them. That kind of ending naturally meant that someone would be truly suppressed or even injured. Chumu also withdrew his sword and smiled slightly. Huang Fuquang was very strong. Chumu didn't need to hold back and used all his strength. The simplified version of Wind Image had also incorporated 30% of the intent realm of wind, but it was only slightly better than the opponent's mountain slashing slash. Chumu didn't have much sword chi left in his dantian. If the fight continued and Huang Fuquang used another killing move, he might have to use his sword force and phantom steps to perfection. At that time, even if he could win in the end, it wouldn't be easy for him. He might even be injured. "You're very strong, and I don't have the confidence to win against you. The fifth sword tower will belong to you from now on." Huang Fuquang continued, "However, let's compete again to see who can break through first and raise their intent realm to 40%. The bet is there's no bet." "Okay." Chumu smiled. The battle came to an end. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 194. Chumu moved into the fifth tower. Compared to the 65th sword tower, the fifth sword tower was only slightly different in its layout. Chumu could see the characteristics of the original owner, so he made some simple adjustments to make it more suitable for his preferences. For Chumu, it was just a change of location. There wasn't much of a difference. However, in the eyes of others, this was an honor that made them green with envy. As for Huang Fuquang, he naturally moved to the 65th tower. The fifth sword tower was near the fourth and sixth sword towers. In the past, when Huang Fuquang lived here, people would often come to visit. However, after Chumu moved in, he didn't show any signs of visiting, so he naturally didn't welcome people visiting. The person in the fifth place can use the cultivation sacred land for a total of 120 hours, which is more than twice the amount of the person in the 65th place. Furthermore, Han Ao lost 50 hours to me in the bet, which adds up to a total of 175 hours. Sitting on the second floor of the tower, Chumu muttered to himself, "It took me 50 hours to raise the concept of cloud from 20% to 30%. But the concept of metal is the third concept, so it's harder to comprehend it. Even if I enter the sacred cultivation ground, it will be more difficult than the concept of cloud. 172 hours seems a lot, but it probably won't be enough for me to raise the concept of metal to 30%. No matter what, I'll use all of the 172 hours to comprehend the concept of metal. If I can't comprehend 30%, then I'll wait until the next round of the small sword tower ranking battle. I believe that at that time, my sword chi cultivation will reach the peak of half-step chi transformation stage. My overall strength will increase again." After thinking about it, Chumu took the fake clear wind sword downstairs and walked out of the tower. He planned to go to the sacred cultivation ground. "Take this." Chumu had only taken a few steps out of the seal when he suddenly heard a delicate shout. Then, a fierce wind whistled from behind him. Chumu could clearly feel the sharpness of the wind. This sword came from the right side of my back. Chumu did not turn his head back. He quickly made an accurate judgment. His body flashed, and a shadow was left behind. Chu Mu's real body appeared next to the opponent. He unsheathed the fake clear wind sword, and his sword was like the wind. Chu Mu reacted quickly, but so did his opponent. At the same time that Chu Mu's sword missed its mark, he felt a sharp gust of wind pressing down on his face, and a cold star rapidly enlarged in front of his eyes. With a flick of his wrist, the fake clear wind sword shone with a dazzling light. The sword touched the cold star and made an ear-piercing sound. The power exploded from the tip of the sword, and the opponent was blown away. With a delicate shout, the opponent flew back like a swallow circling in the air. Both of her hands were holding a short sword, and they were gently flapping like wings. Her body drew an arc in the air like a swallow flying back. As the short swords vibrated, two sharp sword chi shot out. Chu Mu flicked out his sword, shattering the sword chi and bringing up a gust of wind. The opponent's body did not land on the ground. She used the gust of wind to circle in the air like a swallow and attacked Chu Mu from the side. The two thin short swords were incomparably sharp. The sharpness pierced through the air, making people's skin feel cold. "Take this! Swallow sweeping wave!" The delicate shout rang out again. Her body seemed to have turned into a swallow, and the sword chi seemed to have turned into a pair of wings. She was extremely nimble, and her speed suddenly increased a lot. With a whoosh, she flew toward Chu Mu. This move was extremely fast, making it impossible to dodge. Furthermore, the sword chi was extremely sharp. However, in Chu Mu's eyes, it did not have enough power. It seemed to be the prelude to a killing move. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. As his ears trembled, he slashed out with his sword. It seemed simple, but it blocked all of the opponent's following actions. The three swords collided with an ear-piercing sound, and sparks flew everywhere. The nimble body flew back and circled in the air before returning to attack Chu Mu. It was still the same move, swallow sweeping wave. However, Chu Mu had already seen through this move. He slashed out with his sword again, and once again blocked all of the opponent's following actions. After 3 consecutive times, the opponent's body circled in the air, but she did not attack again. Instead, she landed safely on the ground. "Cold-faced man, how did you see through the swallow sweeping wave?" Huang Fu Fian said angrily with her hands on her hip. She wasn't an idiot. On the contrary, she was very smart, so after her 3 consecutive flying swallow waves were blocked by Chu Mu, she knew that her opponent had seen through her flying swallow wave. This caused her to be both shocked and dissatisfied. The corner of Chu Mu's eyes twitched. "Cold-faced man? Was that how she addressed him? Oi, why aren't you answering? Have you learned the lesser swallow sword art before?" Huang Fu Fian asked again. She was startled, and doubt appeared on her face. She mumbled, "That can't be right. The lesser swallow sword art is a simplified version of the ancient sword art, the swallow sword art. Only the royal family should have it. This cold-faced man is clearly not a member of the royal family. How could he have learned the lesser swallow sword art?" Chu Mu heard all of Huang Fu Fian's mumbling. Chu Mu was slightly surprised. So this sword art was called the lesser swallow sword art, and it was a simplified version of the ancient sword art, the swallow sword art. The ancient sword art was a profound sword art that was ranked above the super sword art. It was a profound sword art that Chu Mu could not touch at the moment. As expected, a member of the royal family is incomparable to a disciple of a sword faction, Chu Mu sighed. He did not answer. He turned around to leave. "Oi, cold-faced man, don't think you can leave like this." Huang Fu Fian reacted. She flew past Chu Mu like a swallow and blocked Chu Mu's path. "You have to explain yourself. How did you see through my lesser swallow sword art?" "You haven't mastered it yet," Chu Mu calmly replied. "Haven't mastered it yet?" Huang Fu Fian was startled. Ever since she started practicing her sword art, she had always been praised. No one had ever told her that she had not mastered it yet. This was the first time she had heard such a thing. By the time Huang Fu Fian reacted, Chu Mu was already far away. Oi, oi, cold-faced man, stop right there. Tell me what I haven't mastered. Huang Fu Fian used her little swallow movement technique again and quickly chased after him. She shouted as she chased after him. Huang Fu Kuang happened to pass by and saw this. He quickly stopped Huang Fu Fian. Big guy, help me stop that cold-faced man, Huang Fu Fian immediately said. What? Huang Fu Kuang didn't react for a moment. Huang Fu Fian anxiously stomped her foot, but Chu Mu had already disappeared from her sight. She was so angry that she fiercely stomped on Huang Fu Kuang's foot. Ouch! Huang Fu Kuang immediately pretended to be in pain and jumped around while holding his foot. Stop pretending. It doesn't hurt at all, Huang Fu Fian said angrily. Hee, sister, who bullied you? Tell me and I'll teach him a lesson for you. Huang Fu Kuang chuckled and put down his foot. The cold-faced man who defeated you. Huang Fu Fian rolled her eyes and said, It's him. Huang Fu Kuang was startled. He thought for a moment and shook his head. Sister, I can't help you with this. You know I'm not his match. Why don't you go find brother Shenglong? I believe he can defeat Chu Mu. I knew I couldn't count on you. I'll go find brother Shenglong now. Huang Fu Fian coldly snorted and turned around to leave. This Chu Mu is being targeted by the lesser swallow. Maybe there will be a good show to watch in the future. Huang Fu Kuang rubbed his chin and let out a strange laugh. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 195. What a troublesome guy. Chu Mu thought to himself. However, that small flying swallow sword technique is indeed extraordinary. It truly is worthy of being a simplified version of an ancient sword technique. I wonder how powerful the true flying swallow sword technique is? As he thought about it, Chu Mu arrived at the entrance of the sacred ground. Chu Mu, congratulations on obtaining 5th place on the metal sword list. The guardian elder saw Chu Mu and immediately said with a smile, Thank you, elder. Chu Mu said, Haha, what are you thanking me for? You were able to obtain 5th place, but I didn't give you any help. The guardian elder said with a smile, 5th place has 125 hours of sacred ground use time. However, I heard that you had a bet with Haneo. You won 50 hours from Haneo, so you have a total of 175 hours. Which sacred ground do you plan to go to this time? I want to go to the Gold Sword Tomb. Chu Mu said. Gold Sword Tomb. The guardian elder was stunned, thinking that he had misheard. Yes. Chu Mu said with a certain tone. Why do you want to go to the Gold Sword Tomb? The guardian elder hurriedly persuaded. I know that besides the concept of wind, you must have also comprehended the concept of cloud. In the entire outer palace, there was originally only one person who had comprehended 2 concepts, and with you, you would be the second. Although it is said that the more concepts the better, I believe you also know that comprehending concepts is very difficult. You should focus on the wind and cloud concept. Don't think about comprehending a 3rd concept. It will only make it more difficult and you won't have enough time. The guardian elder advised earnestly, hoping that Chu Mu could become a talent. However, he did not know the real situation of Chu Mu. Thank you for your kindness, elder, but I still want to enter the Gold Sword Tomb. Chu Mu said, his will unshakable. Since you have made up your mind, I cannot interfere with your decision. I only hope that you can consider it carefully. The guardian elder shook his head slightly and sighed. He took out the sword token and handed it to Chu Mu. Thank you, elder. Chu Mu saluted with his sword, took the sword token, and walked into the light door. Chu Mu felt his whole body turn cold. This kind of cold was different from the cold of a world of ice and snow. It was a kind of cold that was full of sharpness. What entered his eyes was an expanse of ruins. It was incomparably desolate, causing Chu Mu's heart to tremble. he could not help but feel somewhat sorrowful. This was a small world with dim light. It didn't seem big, but it also seemed boundless. Everywhere he looked there were swords. Complete swords, broken swords, worn swords, jagged swords, rusty swords, scattered on the ground, stuck in rocks, straight or crooked. They seemed to be telling of the past glories and the present desolation. Golden Sword Tomb. Golden Sword Tomb. Is this the graveyard of swords? Chu Mu could not help but murmur to himself. A wave of sorrow immediately surged from the bottom of his heart. It circled around his heart and did not disperse for a long time. Suddenly, his soul involuntarily trembled. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over his head. A wave of coldness rushed from his spine to the soles of his feet. He suddenly became clear-headed. In an instant, all the swords, no matter if they were complete swords or broken swords, all began to tremble. They emitted a buzzing sound like countless bees dancing in the air. These swords seemed to have recovered their original glories and sharpness. As the swords hummed, they flew up one by one and slowly circled in the air. It was as if 10,000 swords were resonating with each other, emitting a dazzling light. The sharpness of the swords that belonged to metal spread out. It was vast and mighty, filling the surroundings and rushing towards him. With a single breath, Chu Mu felt as if countless swords of qi had entered his nostrils and were constantly cutting. Even his lungs were filled with sharp sword qi, giving off a strange feeling. Gold. Concept of gold. Sharpness, all sorts of comprehensions appeared in his mind. These were all comprehensions of the concept of gold. At the start, Chu Mu had comprehended the concept of gold by comprehending the azure edge sword sex azure edge sword steel. Afterwards, he had cultivated the azure edge sword technique. When he had cultivated the azure edge sword technique to the level of Deshang, he had deepened his comprehension, causing the concept of gold to reach 10%. In the following period of time, basically every day, Chu Mu would take out a bit of time to comprehend the metal concept. However, because it was a third type of concept, his comprehension speed was extremely slow. After half a year, he had only increased a bit, going from 10% to 11%. But now, Chu Mu had once again entered a deep state of comprehension. The various mysteries of the concept of gold once again appeared in his soul, being comprehended by him bit by bit. Unknowingly, the subtleties of the concept of gold were slowly being grasped by Chu Mu. All the swords in the gold sword tomb were emitting a golden luster. A terrifying sharpness hovered in the surroundings. If a weaker swordsman were to enter this place, they would definitely collapse under this sharpness. They would not be able to withstand it at all. Chu Mu stood motionless. Countless sword light were reflected in his eyes. His pupils seemed to be filled with a faint layer of golden light. It was like a flowing waterfall, bringing with it an endless sharpness that could cut through everything. It was unstoppable. Suddenly, he drew his sword and displayed his sword technique. Metal-type sword art. Chu Mu only cultivated the golden edge sword art. Although it was only one, the golden edge sword art's power was extremely powerful. It was one of the top-ranked sword arts. Out of the 13 forms of the golden edge sword technique, Chu Mu started from the first form and displayed one form after another. The fake clear wind sword was covered with a faint layer of golden luster. It let out a buzzing sound, gradually forming a resonance with the 10,000 swords hovering in the surroundings. It was like a conversation between swords. Every move of the gold sword technique left behind a faint needle-like golden light in the air. Each of the needle-like golden light was extremely sharp, wrapping around Chu Mu. As the gold sword technique was displayed, more and more needle-like golden light surrounded Chu Mu. Each of them flew and hovered, cutting in all directions. Chu Mu did not notice it at all. He was completely immersed in the comprehension of the concept of gold, unable to extricate himself. Xiao, 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 xiao. The sound of the air being torn apart rang out in the gold sword tomb. In the resonance of the 10,000 swords, it was as if they were all guided by Chu Mu. One after another, the swords began to dance. A jaw-dropping scene appeared. One after another, the swords seemed to suddenly be filled with intelligence and spirituality. They actually began to display sword technique. Moreover, it was the gold sword technique. Every sword, no matter if it was complete or incomplete, was wrapped in a layer of golden luster. They looked like treasured swords. The gold sword technique displayed was incomparably skillful. Chu Mu did not feel anything at all. He was completely immersed in comprehension. He subconsciously cultivated the gold sword technique, using it as a medium for comprehension. Otherwise, if he saw this strange scene in front of him, who knew how shocked he would be? He would definitely be dumbfounded and shocked. The 10,000 swords that were not used by anyone were actually automatically cultivating the gold sword technique. Time slowly passed. Chu Mu was still immersed in cultivation. The guardian elder thought for a moment and ultimately decided not to report it to the palace master. Instead, he planned on waiting for Chu Mu to come out before advising him to just focus on comprehending the wind concept and cloud concept. Under no circumstances should he try to comprehend the third concept. Not only would it be incomparably difficult, it would also slow down his own progress. Metal is one of the 5 elements. It is an extremely sharp existence. When it reaches the extreme, it can cut through everything. Nothing can stop it. Chu Mu muttered to himself as he displayed the gold sword technique. Unknowingly, his gold sword technique had a sense of transcendence. It seemed that perfect sword technique wasn't the limit. Above perfect, there was an even more profound realm. It was just that Chu Mu didn't know about it yet. Brother Long, you have to help me teach that cold-faced man a lesson. How dare he say that my swift swallow sword technique is not good enough? In the first sword tower, Huang Fu Fian snorted and said, "My swift swallow sword technique has already been cultivated to perfection." Huang Fu Shenglong only smiled slightly, but he was a little surprised. He knew the power of the swift swallow sword technique. It was only slightly inferior to the furious dragon sword technique that he had cultivated. It was very profound and powerful among the advanced sword technique. It could be said that it was one of the top sword technique. Moreover, no matter if it was the furious dragon sword technique or the swift swallow sword technique, only the royal family had them. Ordinary royal family members were not qualified to come into contact with them. This way, it eliminated the possibility that Chu Mu had already seen the small flying swallow sword technique, let alone practiced it. This was what shocked Huang Fu Shenglong the most. As an important member of the royal family, he had heard that there was a kind of person in the world who had extraordinary talent and extraordinary eyesight. They could easily see through the truth and falsehood. Could it be that Chu Mu was such a person with such a special ability? Was that why he could see through the truth of Huang Fu Fian's swift swallow sword technique? In fact, he had overestimated it. Chu Mu only knew that Huang Fu Fian would have a killer move after using the swift swallow sweeping wave. It was purely his intuition as a sword grandmaster. It was this ability that allowed him to react quickly and block the prelude of the killer move in time, preventing the killer move from being executed. But no matter what, Huang Fu Shenglong valued this ability greatly. Maybe I should get in touch with this person. It would be best if I could fight him, Huang Fu Shenglong said to himself. In the blink of an eye, 10 hours had passed. Chu Mu, who was in the gold sword tomb, gradually woke up. The 10,000 swords suddenly paused and fell to the ground, returning to their original state. I have comprehended something, but the progress is slow. It's not even 12%. Chu Mu sighed after sensing it carefully. He took out the sword token and left the gold sword tomb. How is it? The third will is very difficult to comprehend. The guardian elder hurried over and said, "You should listen to this old man's advice. Don't waste your precious time on comprehending the third will. As long as you focus on raising the wind and cloud dual wills to 30%, then raise your cultivation to the peak and make sufficient preparations to break through to the chi transformation realm. At that time, you might even be able to raise the wind and cloud dual wills to 40%, greatly increasing its power. Moreover, although 2 wills are inferior to 3 wills, the wind and cloud wills can be fused together. The combined power is more than 2 times stronger than a single will. It is very frightening. Fusion of wills. Chu Mu's heart skipped a beat. He felt as if a door had opened in front of his eyes. That's right, fusion of wills. When you break through to the chi transformation realm and become an inner palace disciple, you will be able to find books on fusion of wills in the hidden art pavilion. At that time, you will be able to understand it in detail. The guardian elder had a profound expression as he spoke. In reality, it wasn't that he didn't want to give pointers to Chu Mu, but that he himself had only comprehended one type of realm. As for the merging of realms, he had only heard rumors. Thank you, elder, for your guidance. I will take my leave first. Chu Mu saluted with his sword. And it's good that you can think it through. The guardian elder nodded with a gratified expression. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 196. Fusion of Intents. Chu Mu pondered as he walked towards the 5th tower. He had never thought that different intents could be fused together to unleash even more terrifying power. On one hand, it was because he was not strong enough and did not have enough experience. After all, the world was too vast and contained endless mysteries. No one would be able to comprehend them all in their lifetime. On the other hand, Chu Mu was only a very ordinary member of the ancient Sword Continent. He had just taken the first step and had just started walking on the path. He was still very far away from his goal. On the other hand, it was also because of his foundation. Whether it was the Chu family or the Azure Edge Sword sect, their foundations were very shallow. It was also because of this that Chu Mu was clearly lacking in knowledge and experience. He could not be compared to those high-grade sword sections. On the other hand, it was because his understanding of intents was not deep enough. Above small success was Deshang and perfection. Once one's comprehension of intents reached a certain level, they would naturally experience the fusion of intents. In any case, the advice of the guardian elder of the sacred ground allowed Chu Mu to understand the fusion of intents in advance. This was equivalent to opening a new door for Chu Mu. A whole new world appeared before Chu Mu's eyes. Hey, cold-faced man, stop right there. Just as Chu Mu entered the seal, a delicate voice came from not far behind him. Looking back, it was Huang Fu Fian. Chu Mu ignored her and walked into the tower. Humph, cold-faced man, you'd better remember this. How dare you ignore me? Huang Fu Fian waved her fist at Chu Mu's back and curled her lips, revealing 2 small canine teeth as she threatened him. Returning to the 2nd floor, Chu Mu focused on the fusion of intent. After a few hours, he felt exhausted and dizzy, but he did not gain anything. He knew that this was because he did not have enough comprehension of intent. On the other hand, he did not have the correct method. Comprehending intents was already difficult, so the fusion of intents would be even more difficult. What? You still want to enter the Golden Sword Tomb? No, absolutely not. The guardian elder exclaimed, his face turning ugly. Originally, he thought that his advice yesterday had made Chu Mu change his mind, but he did not expect that today, Chu Mu still wanted to enter the Golden Sword Tomb, stubbornly clinging to his own course. Elder, actually, I've already comprehended the concept of metal. The guardian elder's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. His eyes were filled with anger. As a powerful swordsman, his sincere advice had been ignored. His good intentions had been treated as malice. In addition, this elder had helped Chu Mu understand the fusion of intents earlier. Strictly speaking, Chu Mu was indebted to the elder for giving him pointers, so Chu Mu didn't intend to hide it. Moreover, looking at the situation, it seemed that this elder would not agree to let Chu Mu enter the golden sword tomb. As he spoke, Chu Mu released the wave of gold concept. Gold. Gold concept. The guardian elder's eyes bulged as he pointed at Chu Mu. His words became stuttering as he was extremely shocked. Although he was at the Qi High realm and had seen a lot, the guardian elder still took a while to regain his composure. His face was still filled with disbelief. So, you have comprehended the three intents of wind, cloud, and gold? The guardian elder asked to confirm again. Yes. Chu Mu nodded. 3, is there no fourth? The guardian elder did not know what he was talking about at this moment. Right now there are indeed 3. Chu Mu said, but he secretly wondered if there would be 1 or 2 more in the future. It was still unknown. Inconceivable. Truly inconceivable. The guardian elder muttered to himself, and his tone contained an indescribable desolation. I've lived for a few tens of years, and I've once traversed the entire Kuan dynasty, yet I know of very few sword practitioners that have comprehended 2 concepts, let alone 3. Chu Mu did not answer. As far as I know, in the entire Kuan dynasty, there is only one person who has comprehended 3 intents. As if he was immersed in his memories, the guardian elder's tone became erratic. 60 years ago, the Kuan dynasty was the world of that person. No one could surpass him. The geniuses of that era were all overshadowed by him and were reduced to a background. Chu Mu was shocked. Elder, what is that person's name? Having comprehended 3 intents, Chu Mu could understand the difficulty of improving. If it was not for the soul fusion, just 2 intents would be enough for him, not to mention 3. Therefore, he had a heartfelt admiration for the person who was able to comprehend 3 intents 60 years ago. Name. The guardian elder seemed to have regained his consciousness. His whole body shook and his expression changed. His eyes were filled with fear. I can't say it, I can't say it. That person's name is Taboo. I can't say it. The elder's reaction shocked Chu Mu. He instinctively felt that something terrifying must have happened 60 years ago for the elder to have such a reaction. A little curiosity arose in his heart. Chu Mu, let me tell you. It doesn't matter if you're curious or not. In short, you must bury this matter in the depths of your heart. Unless you have sufficient strength, this is a taboo. A taboo that cannot be touched. Knowing it now won't do you any good. On the contrary, it might bring you unnecessary trouble, and even endanger your life. The elder's expression was extremely solemn as he warned. Chu Mu nodded. He could feel the seriousness in the elder's tone. All right, you have comprehended 3 intents. In the entire sword mansion, you can be said to be unique. It is enough to allow your strength to surpass sword practitioners of the same level by a lot. The elder's tone changed and he continued, but at the same time, it will also create a great burden for you. It will consume even more of your time. I hope you can make good use of it. I understand, Chu Mu said. He thought for a moment. Elder, I have a request. What request? The elder asked. Elder, I hope that you can keep the fact that I have comprehended 3 intents a secret, Chu Mu said. The elder was stunned for a moment before he nodded. All right, I can keep it a secret for you now. But I can't guarantee it forever. Thank you, Elder, Chu Mu said. The elder handed the sword token to Chu Mu. Chu Mu took the sword token and walked through the light door. He once again arrived at the golden sword tomb to comprehend the metal intent realm. 3 intents. Moreover, the wind intent realm and the cloud intent realm can complement each other. Once it matures, it might be comparable to the person from 60 years ago. It might even surpass him. The guardian elder muttered to himself. His expression changed several times before he shook his head. No, that person is too terrifying. He is unfathomable. Others will never know how powerful he is. It is impossible to surpass him. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidien. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 197. The pseudo-clear wind sword pierced out, and a needle-like golden light pierced through the void. Tens of thousands of sword cries reverberated in the air. Chu-Mu withdrew his sword. When he opened his eyes, a sharp golden light flashed through his eyes, and it was even denser than before. Taking out the sword token, Chu-Mu left the golden sword tomb and returned the token to the guardian elder. Chu-Mu, how's your comprehension of the concept of metal? The guardian elder asked with a smile. Not enough, I need more time. Chu-Mu replied. I hope you can obtain a higher ranking in the next small sword pagoda ranking battle and gain more time. The guardian elder smiled. I'll take my leave first. Chu-Mu saluted with his sword and turned to leave. In the past 3 months, Chu-Mu had used 10 hours a day. Now that 35 days had passed, all 172 hours had been used up, and Chu-Mu's metal concept had increased from the original 11% to 23%. There was an obvious improvement, and the power of the golden edge sword art had also increased. Returning to the 5th sword tower, Chu-Mu cultivated the golden edge sword art on the 1st floor. During the 35 days in the golden sword tomb, Chu-Mu had been cultivating the golden edge sword art every time. Now, he had a feeling that the golden edge sword art was about to transcend. Perfection is not the end of the sword art. There should be a higher level above perfection, but I couldn't touch it in the past. But now, staring at the sword in his hand, bits and pieces of enlightenment emerged in his mind. With a casual stab, a sharp sound broke through the air. The golden light was as bright as a needle, dazzling to the eyes. This was the 3rd style of the golden edge sword art, but it emitted a sense of transcendence, as if it wanted to break through some kind of shackles and cage. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Chu-Mu's attacks became increasingly casual and unrestrained. Although there seemed to be no pattern, each of his sword strikes was incomparably sharp, piercing through the air and causing people to feel a chill. In the air, needle-like golden light flickered, as if golden threads were intertwined. Each of the golden threads emitted a terrifying sharpness and sharpness. From then on, Chu-Mu focused on comprehending the concept of metal and cultivating the sword art every day. In the blink of an eye, there was less than 10 days before the next small sword pagoda ranking battle. Chu-Mu had reached the golden edge sword art perfection and transcendence. Chu-Mu had transcendence, and transcendence, and transcendence, transcendence of perfection, transcendence, and transcendence. As for the metal concept, with the help of the inertia from the metal sword tomb, it broke through once more, reaching 24%. It wasn't far from 30%. Transcendence transcending of pinnacle peak of peak peak. Chu-Mu's overall strength had clearly improved again. Of night. Of 5 of sect of something. Ouyang Qingye applied to issue a challenge to Huangfu Shenglong from the Hall of Hundred Affairs. The 3rd on the iron sword ranking against the 1st. Everyone in the outer house was alarmed. Even the house master was paying close attention. Huangfu Shenglong had been the 1st on the iron sword ranking for a long time, while Ouyang of 2 had been in the 3rd for a long time. The arena outside the 100 Hall was bustling with noise and excitement. All the students had gathered there, waiting for the battle to begin. The 1st against the 3rd. Chu-Mu had also arrived. He stared at the empty arena and thought to himself, Huangfu Shenglong and Ouyang of 2 haven't fought for a long time. This time, it will definitely be an exciting battle. Strange. There are only 5 days left before the small sword pagoda ranking battle. Why didn't Ouyang of 2 wait until after the ranking battle to challenge Huangfu Shenglong? Who knows? Anyway, it's none of our business. We're only responsible for watching. Suddenly, a strong aura came from afar. Then, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. A figure flew over like a ghost at an extremely fast speed. With a whoosh, a figure passed by the crowd and landed on the arena. It was Ouyang of Two in a black robe. There were red patterns on his robe, making him look demonic. Once he appeared, Ouyang of Two became the focus of everyone's attention. He stood proudly on the arena, his eyes shining with a sharp light. His aura fluctuated, and his temperament gave people a sense of evil charm. Coupled with his handsome face that made people jealous, he instantly became the Prince Charming in the hearts of the thousands of female swordsmen. This pretty boy dares to challenge Brother Shenglong. He's asking for it. Huang Fu Fian shook her head and said with disdain. Ouyang of Two wouldn't do something like this if he wasn't confident, Huang Fu Kuang said. At this moment, a majestic aura came over, startling the crowd. They all turned around and hurriedly opened a path for Huang Fu Shenglong to pass through. Huang Fu Shenglong walked over with a long sword at his waist. He didn't use any movement skills, but there was a majestic aura around him. It was like a tidal wave. He was like a king, an overlord. As soon as he appeared, his powerful aura suppressed everyone present. Ouyang of Two frowned, and there was a trace of darkness in his eyes. Huang Fu Shenglong had stolen his limelight the moment he appeared. This feeling made him very unhappy. Huang Fu Shenglong was neither fast nor slow, like a king patrolling. With every step he took, he walked towards the sword battle arena. The aura around his body became more and more majestic and condensed. His aura was like a surging tide, and one could vaguely hear the sound of waves. When he reached the bottom of the arena, Huang Fu Shenglong jumped lightly. His whole body was pushed up by the waves and landed on the arena. You're not my opponent. Why are you wasting your time? Huang Fu Shenglong looked at Ouyang of Two and said indifferently. His tone was overbearing. I wasn't your opponent before. But now that might not be the case. Ouyang of Two opened his arms and snorted. A strange smile flashed across his handsome face, and a faintly discernible darkness filled the surroundings. Looks like you've already comprehended 30% of the darkness mentality. Huang Fu Shenglong's eyes flashed with surprise, but his tone was still as indifferent as before. That's right. I've already comprehended 30% of the darkness mentality. I'll let you have a taste of the power of 30% of the darkness mentality. Ouyang of Two smiled and pulled out the sword at his waist. This fake sword was completely black. It was 3 fingers wide, but it was very thin. It was emitting a faint black luster. Make your move. Huang Fu Shenglong didn't move. His indifferent tone made Ouyang of Two's eyes twitch. Shortly after, he slashed out with his sword. A black sword chi tore through the air, emitting a sharp whistling sound as it slashed towards Huang Fu Shenglong. Huang Fu Shenglong instantly unsheathed his sword. The sword was like a raging flood dragon. It let out a roar and shattered the black sword chi. Moreover, a light blue sword chi penetrated the void and rushed towards Ouyang Qingye like a small flood dragon. Ouyang of Two's body flickered like a ghost. He dodged the sword chi and appeared beside Huang Fu Shenglong. He counterattacked with his sword, rolling up a darkness. The dark sword chi and dark sword arts that he cultivated were also of the darkness mentality. They complemented each other and were extremely powerful. Huang Fu Shenglong seemed like he was about to be devoured by the darkness. With a low roar, the fake raging dragon sword was like a raging dragon emerging from the sea. Its majestic aura was vast and surging like a huge wave. It instantly shattered the darkness that was enveloping him. Ouyang of Two's expression didn't change. As he retreated, he slashed out with his fake sword. Streaks of black sword chi intertwined into a sword net that almost covered the entire arena. Break for me! The roar was like the anger of a king. The fake sword in Huang Fu Shenglong's hand emitted a light blue light. It was like a surging wave. He slashed out with his sword. The resplendent light blue sword chi seemed to have materialized. It crushed the black sword net in a crushing manner. So powerful! Chumu was secretly surprised. Whether it was Ouyang of Tu or Huangfu Shenglong, both of them had their own means and were very powerful. Moreover, Chu Mu felt that the two of them hadn't used their full strength yet. The current battle was just a test or a warm-up. The black sword Qi and the light blue sword Qi constantly slashed out and collided with each other. The entire sword battle arena was completely filled with the two types of sword Qi. The terrifying shockwaves splashed out and shot into the ground below the sword battle arena, creating craters and sending rocks flying everywhere. The sword Qi of the two had already reached the peak of the half-step Qi transformation realm. Moreover, the sword Qi they cultivated was also very profound. Their sword Qi was incomparably pure and powerful, and its power was extremely terrifying. The spectators below the arena were all dumbfounded. They were deeply shocked by the fierce battle in front of them. They all thought that if they were the ones fighting against the two on the arena, they probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a single sword strike and would be killed instantly. The sturdy arena was shattered one after another. Under the collision of the sword Qi, cracks spread out in all directions. Huangfu Shenglong's and Ouyang of Tu's swords collided. The air shattered and an ear-piercing sound erupted. The sparks were as resplendent as fireworks. Ouyang of Tu's figure was like a ghost. It was silent and very sudden. Huangfu Shenglong's figure was filled with power. It was like a flood dragon breaking through the water and crushing everything. I didn't expect the gigolo to become so strong, Huangfu Fian said with some indignation. Huangfu Kuang's face was somewhat serious. His eyes were wide open and filled with battle intent. This kind of clash was what he liked the most. Huangfu Kuang subconsciously looked at Chu Mu. I wonder how strong this guy is. Can he be comparable to the two of them? On the other hand, Qin Shi, who was ranked second, had a calm expression. This kind of clash was nothing in her eyes. The two of them hadn't shown their true strength yet. Ouyang of Tu leaped into the air and dove down. His black sword seemed to have disappeared into the air, leaving behind countless black sword shadows. They covered the sky and covered the earth, enveloping Huangfu Shenglong. Huangfu Shenglong seemed to have been swallowed up again. A strange killing intent was hidden deep in the darkness. It was like a venomous snake in the corner waiting for an opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. Huangfu Shenglong's eyes widened. It was as if he could see through the darkness. His sword pierced the sky. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation.